That's at no extra cost. Shop our 5G handsets in store or online at your local O2 store or o2.co.uk. 18 plus. Offer excludes Galaxy Fold 5G. Purchased by the 25th of the 12/19. Claim from Samsung within 30 days. T's and C's apply.
Middle of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe for this Thursday, the 19th of December in London. Coming up this hour, exit this way. The Riksbank is poised to leave almost 5 years of negative rates today. Governor Stefan Ingves joins us after the decision. Holding tight, the Bank of England is expected to follow the BOJ in holding rates steady, its first meeting since Boris Johnson's election victory.
Donald Trump becomes just the third U.S. president to be impeached as the House of Representatives charges him with abuse of power and obstructing Congress. A trial will be held in the Senate next month. I'm Leanne Gerrans with World News.
And Prime Minister Boris Johnson will lay out his government's legislative plans today in the Queen's speech.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, on DAB Digital Radio London, Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington DC, Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning from London. I'm Naira Chahich. You're listening to Daybreak Europe live on London DAB Digital Radio. Roger Hearing is out for the day. It's coming up to 8:01 a.m. in London, 9:01 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. And we check the markets for you every 15 minutes here on Bloomberg Radio. Quite a lack of catalyst for the markets today. It is quite a big central bank day. Of course, we've had the decision from the BOJ. We look ahead to the Riksbank and the BOE. But nonetheless, really muted trading here on the Stock 600 1 minute into the open. After 2 days of declines, we do edge into the green. We're up 0.1%. This after we saw stocks drift lower in Asia. The FTSE 100 unchanged. The CAC 40 trading absolutely flat. The DAX edging into the green, up 0.1%. IBEX is flat. The FTSE MIB posting small gains of almost 0.2%. Looking ahead to the US equity market open, futures are not giving us much direction at all. Dow, S&P and NASDAQ futures all trading sideways after we saw the S&P 500 close flat yesterday. The 10-year Treasury yield did move up some 4 basis points, and we hold on a 192 handle right now, going nowhere. 10-year Bund yield steady at -24. The 10-year gilt yield edging up a basis point towards a 79 handle. In terms of FX, again, not a lot of action here today. The South Korean won has been on a little bit of a tear recently, and there's some technicals suggesting that that could continue. But in terms of G10, the best performing currency today has been the Aussie dollar, and it's still up there after better than expected jobs data. Of course, the market's still eyeing a potential rate cut from the RBA in February 2020. In terms of commodities, you're also really seeing a lack of action today. Gold unchanged, copper off just 0.1%. WTI trades at $60.89 a barrel, Brent at 66.19. Both absolutely dead steady. So really, not a lot going on across markets today. Yes, we have the phase 1 deal, but nothing has been inked yet, and that is something that markets are focusing on going into 2020. Cable on the front foot slightly after 2 days of declines, up 0.25 percentage point on a 131 handle. So that's how the markets are looking. Let's get into our stocks to watch today. And for that, we've got Bloomberg's Lisa Pham with us in the London studio. Great to have you with us, Lisa. So let's kick off with chemicals maker Clariant. What's the story here?
So Clariant is selling the entire master batches business to Poly1, which is based in Cleveland, just outside of Cleveland. This values the master batches business at $1.56 billion, and the deal is expected to close in the third quarter of next year. Now, it's important to keep in mind that the chemicals makers, and that includes Clariant, they've been grappling with a slowdown in some of its markets, including the automotive industry. So the sale is a sign that Clariant's pushing ahead with a strategy overhaul. And for Poly1, acquiring master batches would make them a world leader in supplying color concentrates for plastics.
Interesting. And we are actually just still waiting to get an opening price out of Clariant. So we'll bring that to you as soon as it crosses the Bloomberg. Certainly what we saw is that it was up 4.4% pre-market after the master batches sale. So we'll see if the cash trading reflects that as well. Turning to Scandinavian bank Nordea. So Clariant selling, Nordea Nordea agreeing to buy something. What and for how much?
That's correct. So Nordea Bank is purchasing all the shares in SG Finance. So it plans to combine that with its own pan-Nordic finance company, which is called Nordea Finance. Nordea Finance and Société Générale Equipment Finance, they've also entered into a commercial partnership agreement. Nordea said that this partnership combines the strengths of the two companies to offer a wide range of equipment finance solutions and services to international vendors. So we're seeing a lot more consolidation happening in the financial services industry at the moment. And we have Nordea shares up 0.6% at the moment.
Yeah, correct. So it's on a 6th day of gains now. And then let's turn to the UK as well, because we're looking ahead to the BOE rate decision. Of course, not expecting anything to happen today, but the market eyeing cuts in 2020. Are we expecting any move in property stocks today ahead of that, but also with news out in terms of the housing market from RICS?
Yeah, so the vote split today for the Bank of England interest rates decision could be quite interesting. Traders have been ramping up bets that the Bank of England could lower interest rates at the end of next year, as Deutsche Bank is predicting that they could even do this as soon as January. So it's definitely something to watch when the rate decision is announced later today. And as you mentioned, like there's a new report out today. The Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors said that the UK's property market won't see a flurry of activity next year, even after the Conservative Party's election win. So it is still a tough moment for like UK property stocks at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have Clarion on the move now. It's up 3.4%. So the stock is gaining, not quite as much in pre-market, but we're still seeing it bid up after Clarion has sold its master batches for about $1.6 billion to Poly1. Great to have you with us in the studio. Bloomberg's Lisa Pham with us in the London studio for our stocks to watch. Now, Lisa was talking about the Bank of England decision. Let's continue with that, as today at noon we'll get its latest rate decision from the Bank of England. Mark Carney and company are expected to keep interest rates on hold, but as Bloomberg's Jill Ward explains, speculation is mounting that policymakers will ease next year.
Economists expect policymakers Michael Saunders and Jonathan Haskell to repeat their calls for lower interest rates, with some expecting a third to join the dissent. Traders have been increasing bets for the BOE to lower rates at the end of 2020 after Prime Minister Boris Johnson reignited fears of a no-deal Brexit. In London, Jill Ward, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Meanwhile, Sweden's Riksbank is set to swim against the tide of global easing. The central bank is expected to hike by 25 basis points, ending almost 5 years of negative rates. A slight uptick in inflation last month will provide the justification, but officials may signal caution for the years ahead. And earlier today, the Bank of Japan left policy unchanged. As Bloomberg economy editor Paul Jackson explains, the decision comes amid a government stimulus package and a brightening global economy.
The stamp pat decision was in line with the view of all 35 economists surveyed by Bloomberg. The BOJ has now reached the end of a precarious year without having to delve deeper into its depleted ammunition. Still, economists noted that risks to trade and even Brexit remain. It's also yet to be seen how the economy will pick up from a sales tax and a typhoon. In Tokyo, Paul Jackson, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Of course, we did hear from Haruhiko Kuroda as well in his news conference earlier. Lots of comments coming through in terms of negative and prolonged low rates. He said they'll continue to carefully watch the side effect on banks and that low rates may hurt profits and bank functions. But he also said there's no change in the stance of maintaining its easing program. He did also point to the government stimulus and the importance of that. There were lots of comments coming through. He said downside risks are significant for Japan's economy. It's appropriate to keep the policy stance tilted towards easing. But he did say that the global economic outlook is better than a few months ago. Still appropriate to keep the BOJ policy tilted towards easing as well. And also what was interesting was that he did make some comments on climate change, saying that he's watching risks from climate change on the financial system and that central banks can't be the main actor on climate change. It's the theme that's coming up more and more. Of course, Christine Lagarde has referred to it, but also we understand that the Bank of England is starting to look at the financial stability impacts on firms of climate change. Now, in the UK, 1 week on from the UK election, Prime Minister Boris Johnson will lay out his government's legislative plans today. Bloomberg's Ewan Potts has a preview.
You could be forgiven for thinking these Queen's speeches come round more often these days. Indeed, it's less than 10 weeks since Her Majesty outlined 26 pieces of legislation that Boris Johnson planned to bring forward. After that parliamentary session was cut short, the PM is likely to use his new majority to focus on delivering Brexit and funding the NHS. Other plans he's likely to continue with include a tax cut for small retailers to help struggling high streets, measures to tackle serious crime, and a ramping up of infrastructure spending. In London, I'm Ewan Potts, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Yeah, the details on the spending plan are going to be really interesting. In terms of the NHS, which of course was a key battleground in the election, what Boris Johnson has said is that there'll be an extra £34 billion, that's $45 billion a year, spent on the NHS through to 2024. And in general, this new government is seen as maybe bringing an end to austerity, but it doesn't necessarily mean we're going to see a huge opening of the fiscal taps. If I can give you some stats, Boris Johnson is expecting to spend an extra £1 for every 6 that Jeremy Corbyn would have, and also spending is expected to amount to less than 40% of GDP, lower than the 50-year historical average, and spending is expected to look a little bit more like Spain rather than Germany. Just a little bit more context for you there as we await those details. Now, in top corporate news, more woes for Boeing. The plane maker has been downgraded one notch by Moody's. It now sits at A3, 4 levels above speculative grade. This is due to uncertainty over when its best-selling jet will return to service. The 737 MAX has been grounded since March after 2 fatal crashes. If the grounding runs into the second half of 2020, Boeing could be downgraded again. And Micron is giving a strong sales forecast for the current quarter. It's telling investors the worst of the memory chip slump is over. The company's CEO is confident the current quarter is a bottom for results. Some good news for Micron. It's got a license to resume selling components to Huawei. Those are your top stories for the latest in global news. Here's Leanne Gerrans. Hey, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. Let's start with our top story. President Donald Trump has been impeached. It sets a stage for a trial in the Senate where he will almost certainly be acquitted. The vote in the House went mostly along partisan lines. There was not a single Republican vote to impeach. President Trump attacked the move, calling it suicide for the Democrats.
This lawless partisan impeachment is a political suicide march for the Democrat Party. Have you seen my polls in the last 4 weeks?
Australia's most populous state, New South Wales, has declared an emergency. That's as a heat wave which produced the hottest day on record exuberates devastating bushfires. Bloomberg's Jason Scott reports.
Authorities are warning of extreme wind conditions and surging temperatures that will make efforts to battle almost 100 fires burning across the state even harder. On Tuesday, the average maximum temperature across Australia reached 40.9 Celsius. The crisis has intensified the debate about what impact climate change is having on the world's driest inhabited continent. In Canberra, Jason Scott, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
In France, President Emmanuel Macron has signalled a willingness to improve on his pension reform plans. That's in an effort to end a standoff with unions. Strikes across the nation are entering their 3rd week. The government is seeking a truce during the holiday period, but the unions want President Macron to now back down. And Russian President Vladimir Putin gives his annual press conference, and that's happening later this morning, well, in the next hour or so. Bloomberg's Ilya Arkhipov tells us what we should expect.
He will take several dozens questions, while almost 2,000 journalists will be present in a giant hall in Moscow Business Center that is likely to last for several hours. Topics usually include economy, energy, relations with the US, and other aspects of the Russian foreign policy. In Moscow, Ilya Arkhipov, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira. You said I was going to call Putin earlier.
Yes, are you going to?
Well, I'm not going to because apparently...
Because you can't speak Russian or...
Excuse me, you don't know. No, I can't.
Can you?
Yeah, I can use Translate or whatever it is on my phone. But what it is actually in 2008, the news conference clocked a record 4 hours, 40 minutes. So I don't really know if I want to sit on my phone that long.
Yeah, it always goes on for absolutely hours. It's a joy to watch. I think you should tune in.
I will tune in, definitely. Well, I'll tune in while I'm listening here.
Tom Keane will be tuning in. I remember one year when he tried to phone in on air. That was interesting. Anyway, coming up next, lots to discuss and look forward to in the show, of course, as we're heading to year end and looking ahead to 2020. We've been looking at 5 things to watch in various European equity sectors. Today, we'll be talking about European energy stocks. Overall, the stock 600 in the green, 13 minutes into the equity market open, up 0.2% after 2 days of declines. This is Bloomberg.
Wat Russell Shaw is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor, is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the Atlanta Braves, this meant bringing a $1 billion stadium project to life through a public-private partnership, creating the Battery, a mixed-use development that turned an underdeveloped area into a thriving community.
Always on the cutting edge of community development, Cohn Resnick advises industry participants on tax credits, affordable housing, opportunity zones, and more, helping communities reach their full potential. Explore more at cohnresnick.com/MLB. Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
Open calendar. What's my schedule looking like?
Next Thursday, you will be caught in an emergency flash flood between Park and First Street.
What? No, that doesn't work. I'm busy then. Decline. Decline.
Floods don't exactly work around your schedule. Disasters don't plan ahead. But you can. It starts with talking to your loved ones about making an emergency plan. So don't wait. Communicate. Get started today at ready.gov/plan. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Vonnie Quinn.
For more on global markets, let's get to our first guest. We're joined by Julian Emanuel, BTIG Chief Equity and Derivatives Strategist. Is the Fed on hold for all of 2020, and what does that do to currencies? The dollar, does it stay as strong as it is?
Actually, we do think the Fed is on hold. The most important thing right now is the Fed managing money market liquidity, and we do believe that's under control. We think that the repo problems in September actually, if anything, are turning into a net positive, because if you look, the Fed realized the problem quickly, has begun expanding gently the balance sheet. It's not QE, it's short-term bill buying, to be clear, but that is something that we think gives comfort to asset volatility. Volatility has been very muted in the fourth quarter. We expect that to continue. In terms of interest rates, again, the Fed on hold, it really is not, rates are not the issue. To us, the key will be is, how the money markets evolve, and, does policy, global geopolitical policy, is that the threat? That to us is really the biggest potential headwind as we go into the year.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff. Time for Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now over to the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin. For today's morning call, here's Richard Jones.
Good morning, Sandra. Most Asian equity markets are flat to slightly lower in today's session. The Nikkei 225 was down by 0.3%, as is the Nasdaq. As is the Hang Seng, with the Shanghai Composite and Kospi both steady. U.S. equity futures are little changed, with E-mini S&P and E-mini Nasdaq futures both trading sideways. European equities are mostly higher at the open, with the Euro Stoxx 50, the DAX, and the CAC 40 all up by 1 to 0.2%, with the FTSE 100 slightly lagging, trading little changed. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is 1 basis point higher at 1.93%, with the 10-year German bond yield up 2 basis points, trading at minus 0.23%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is down 0.1%, with the Australian dollar the standout in the G10 space, up 0.4 versus the greenback, after strong Aussie jobs data earlier today. Looking ahead to the European event risk today, the highlights are the monetary policy announcements from the Riksbank, Norges Bank, and the Bank of England. We'll also get UK retail sales, and the ECB's Lane is chairing a panel in Frankfurt this afternoon. That's it from me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg Terminal. Sandra?
Thanks, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Thank you. Scotland's First Minister is claiming the mandate for a new independence referendum is now unarguable. Nicola Sturgeon is expected to publish a paper setting out her case for a second vote. The SNP won 48 seats in last week's general election. Prime Minister Narendra Modi's government has imposed curfew-like restrictions across vast swathes of India. Internet services in parts of the capital, New Delhi, have also been shut down as he tries to quell nationwide protests against India's controversial religion-based law. And finally, do you want to live longer? Well, going to the theatre once every month may slash your risk of premature death, according to a new study. University College London researchers tracked nearly 7,000 adults over the age of 50, and that was for 12 years. Volunteers who engaged with the arts every few months were 14% less likely to die by the end of the study. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Wow, that's so interesting. What's the reasoning behind it? Is it just that you're spending time with people, doing things you enjoy? It lowers your stress levels? I mean, I'm definitely going to start going to the theatre more.
Well, I think it's all of those things, because the research adds that the evidence in engaging in art, like you said, looking at beautiful paintings, playing the didgeridoo or any sort of instrument can really benefit your health, because it obviously helps with all the serotonin in your body too. And then meet people, you're learning, you're keeping active, all things combined. I love the theatre. We should go together, neighbour.
We should. I went to see Death of a Salesman recently. Amazing, but happy to do more in 2020. And love you brought the science into it. Leanne Gerrans with the science of serotonin. Thank you so much, Leanne, with the world news. Apologies to daily listeners. You'll know that I've had a hacking cough for 2 weeks. So if you hear me sound as if I've got something in my mouth, it's because I've got a lozenge to try and calm the cough. But anyway, let's turn back to European equities. A superlative year for European equities has been less kind to energy stocks, and 2020 may bring more bumps along the road. For more on what we should be watching in the European energy stocks in the year ahead, Bloomberg stocks reporter Felipe Pacheco joins me from our Dubai studio. Felipe, great to have you with us. So, energy stocks, second worst performing industry group on the Stock 600 this year, up just 5%. In terms of the look ahead for 2020, are there any prospects for improvement if we look at the prospects for the oil price, first of all?
Well, it's very well pointed, as you said. The group of energy stocks in Europe right now, if we look at the index, it has 23 members. It's underperforming the main equities gauge for the whole continent by far. If we look at for 2020 and for actually potential catalysts of an improvement, we have to actually understand why we are at this level. If we consider just prices for December on, for example, Brent is about 10% higher. That's pretty much because we had interesting news coming from the OPEC Plus meeting in Vienna. The cuts were bigger than many analysts were expecting for next year. And of course, we have an improvement in the whole conversation between China and the U.S. regarding trade. If those elements actually keep going in a better and in a more positive way for next year, there could be an improvement for sentiment in general towards growth, and of course oil should follow. Therefore, we would expect a natural reaction within the sector that's been underperforming.
Felipe, are we expecting any change to dividend and buyback policies? Because that's one thing that people point to as a positive in the energy sector when there are a lot of negatives, some of which we'll get onto in a moment.
Yes, that's definitely, let's say it's a topic that should remain quite hot for this sector next year. For example, we had Shell recently curtailing big buyback that's been going on for a while. The CEO of the company said in October that there is a challenging outlook ahead, and therefore they might actually delay the time frame for a program that it was seen as speeding up into 2020. Of course, if we have more announcements, if we have bigger companies just changing their plans, there should be a reaction quite immediate in the market. We cannot forget about the M&A activity within the sector as well, especially between between companies that are based in non-OPEC countries with those within OPEC. We've seen some strong activity in that sector recently, and it wouldn't be surprising to see more big deals coming in the first half of 2020.
Yeah, I mean, two other things to talk about, but we only have a minute left, Felipe, is whether we'll see an international listing from Saudi Aramco, but also the transition to green energy. Is this likely to move share prices much, given that this is a multi-year focus, the transition to green energy?
Well, it is likely to move shares for those companies that give clear indications of what they are doing, what their plans are, and how they're going to execute them. For example, in 2019, Spain's Repsol became the first oil company to commit to net zero emission by 2050. As you mentioned, this is a long-term project. It's way ahead in time, but still we have it's a good signal to the market.
Felipe Pacheco, great to have you with us from our Dubai studio, our Bloomberg stocks reporter, talking about what 2020 might bring for European energy stocks. Great to have you with us. We are 25 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe. We've had 2 days of declines, not much in terms of catalysts out there for markets. The Stock 600 edging into the green, up 0.2%. We break the Riksbank decision next. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Housing is back in the economic spotlight this morning as the National Association of Realtors reports on November home resales. Economists surveyed by Bloomberg are forecasting a 0.4% decline from October to an annual selling rate of 5.44 million. Housing data earlier this week pointed to a strong market as housing starts and an index of home builder sentiment showed strong gains. Also this morning, we get the government's weekly report on first-time jobless claims. The Philadelphia Fed will release its monthly snapshot of manufacturing in the Mid-Atlantic region, and the Conference Board will update its index of leading economic indicators. Earnings reports from at least half a dozen companies are on the calendar, including Nike, Rite Aid, Darden, ConAgra, Scholastic, and Accenture. Trading starts this morning with the Dow Jones Industrial Average at 28,239, down 28 yesterday. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Portfolio Analyst, powered by Interactive Brokers, helps sophisticated investors understand the health of their complete financial portfolio. Portfolio Analyst is free and easy-to-use personal finance software that creates a consolidated view of banking, brokerage, and credit card accounts. Compare your consolidated portfolio against more than 200 benchmarks or create customized benchmarks for analyzing performance. Calculate time and money-weighted rates of return and use Portfolio Analyst for forecasting. Sign up for free at portfolioanalyst.com.
Rich, it's just a...
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
You know it's out there somewhere, but you just keep missing out. I'm talking about your dream job. Now it's easier to find and land your next role with the LinkedIn app. Build connections, keep in touch, and be the first to hear about new jobs. LinkedIn has more openings than applicants. And sometimes all it takes is one LinkedIn connection to land the job that's right for you. Don't miss out. Get your next big break and find the job meant for you. Download the free LinkedIn app today.
At Wix, we'll create your dream kitchen from design to show-off ready and take care of everything. And now, get up to 50% off showroom kitchen units. Book your free design appointment today. Cure your house embarrassment with Wix. Selected ranges excluded. See wix.co.uk.
I've always loved a kitchen experiment, especially smoothies. I've blended all sorts of mad combinations. Strawberry and charcoal, broccoli and chocolate. Not my best, that. But when I test blenders in the Witch Lab, it's not about flavour, it's about performance. Our tests use proper tough stuff, hard ice, strong veg, rough nuts. And the blenders that can hack it are the only ones we recommend for your kitchen.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Take 26.
Enjoy Taylor's Select Reserve Port, available for just £7.50, or Oyster Bay Sauvignon and many more for just £7 each.
I know it's Christmas, but you're getting overexcited again.
Our latest deal, Co-op, is what we do.
Offer subject to availability until stocks last on selected lines. See participating stores for details. Offer ends 3rd of January. Please drink responsibly.
Ho, ho, ho. Who's made a list this year?
I want a new phone. One with amazing cameras, ultra-wide lens, of course, live focus video. Well, it has to be 5G ready to stream all my films. Can it come with something awesome to listen to them through?
Darling, I think he was talking to the kids.
Get everything you want and more. Purchase a Samsung 5G ready device and claim a pair of silver wireless Galaxy Buds at no extra cost. Shop our 5G handsets in store or online at your local O2 store or o2.co.uk. 18 plus. Offer excludes Galaxy Fold 5G. Purchased by the 25th of the 12/19. Claim from Samsung within 30 days. T's and C's apply.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB Digital Radio. To New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Naira Chahich, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe live in London. Sweden's Riksbank raising its key rate to 0. That is the red headline crossing for Bloomberg right now. The Riksbank raising its repo rate to 0, so exiting negative rates for the first time in almost 5 years. This is something that was expected by economists in the market, so it's not coming as a surprise. In terms of some of the details, the Riksbank rate is expected to remain at 0% in coming years. That is the guidance that we're getting. The Riksbank sees the repo rate averaging 0% in the fourth quarter of 2020. The October estimate was 0%, so that's unchanged there. It's expected to remain at 0 in coming years. I already broke that, but that's what the red headline is also saying, as well as the red headline of it raising its key rate 25 basis points to 0. The Swedish krona against the euro was dead flat going into the decision, and it's holding its ground after the decision again. This was expected, so not expecting huge moves in markets. Euro Swedish krona trading at 10.4680. In terms of some of the other guidance, just looking through the headlines, and we've got some guidance around GDP. So it sees 2019 GDP of 1.1% is a slight downgrade on the October estimate of 1.3%, but the Riksbank seeing 2020 Swedish GDP of 1.2%. That is the same as the guidance they gave in October. And the Riksbank developments since the October meeting as expected on the whole. So we've got the Riksbank exiting negative rates for the first time in almost 5 years. We'll get back to that, more discussion around that in just a moment. But first, let's take a look at the markets. We're almost 32 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe. And really, there are not a lot of catalysts out there to move the market either way. And you can see that reflected in the Stock 600, which earlier was edging into positive territory. It's giving up the gains pretty much now to trade flat after 2 days of declines. Taking a look across regional equity benchmarks, FTSE 100 unchanged, CAC 40 unchanged, the IBEX also treading water. The FTSE MIB edging into the green by 0.1%. The DAX edging into the red by almost 0.2%. US futures set up like so, dead flat. Dow, S&P, NASDAQ futures unmoved after the S&P 500 closed yesterday. The 10-year Treasury yield moved up 4 basis points yesterday. We hold on a 192 handle, edging towards 193, but not quite there. Pretty steady. The 10-year Bund yield moves higher by a basis point and a half at negative 23. 10-year gilt yield up a basis point. In fact, yields edging higher in Europe in general. In terms of the major moves in currencies. So looking at G10 now, the Norwegian krona beating the Aussie dollar to be the best G10 performer in today's session. The Aussie dollar was up top earlier after better than expected jobs data, and the pound also gaining after a couple of days of declines. Taking a look at sterling, it's been down for 2 days. It's now up 0.3%, 131.17. Elsewhere, really dead quiet in terms of commodities. WTI and Brent unchanged. WTI trading at 68 60.89, Brent at 66.09. So that's what we're doing in terms of the markets. Let's get back to the Riksbank decision. I just broke the news that it hiked rates by 25 basis points as expected. The Swedish central bank thereby ending almost 5 years of negative rates. For more, I'm joined by Bloomberg Economics Executive Editor Simon Kennedy. Simon, this decision was as expected, hasn't come as a surprise. Do we look at this as a signal to what other central banks might do, or is the Riksbank a unique case with the inflation moving higher, a justification for it to actually raise to zero?
Well, that's the justification, along with the kind of myriad of complaints negative rates has driven in the among the region's banks. Is it a test case? It's certainly going to be something that other central banks, such as the ECB, Bank of Japan, monitor. Obviously, they're dealing with much larger economies, much more open economies than the Swedish one. But any time a central bank tries to move away from these crisis level rates, it's something others will keep an eye on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, certainly they're pointing to some caution ahead, and that's kind of what was expected as well here. In terms of pressure perhaps on other central banks, I mean, some going into this decision were saying that, look, if we do get the Riksbank coming out of negative territory, that certainly means that for central banks in the UK, in the US and Australia, the lower bound is zero and no lower. Would you agree with that assessment?
Well, let's look at the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has clearly said on repeated occasions that it's not the biggest fan of negative interest rates. There are some constituencies there, including the financial sector, that really don't like them. Obviously, a bank-dependent economy such as the US, that carries some weight. But Chairman Jerome Powell and others have clearly signaled they've no interest in moving below zero. Others less sure. They've mentioned it as an option, but one they're perhaps reluctant to embrace.
Yeah, the Riksbank was among 5 economies globally pioneering negative rates. It's now the first to move back into positive territory. Who might follow it next? The ECB, the Bank of Japan, or are we set for negative rate territory for the long haul?
I don't think there's any economists predicting the ECB or the Bank of Japan to raise rates anytime soon. Question, I guess, is for both of them is whether they dig deeper into even lower rates, but the ECB and Mario Draghi have maintained that option. Obviously, Christine Lagarde has that option as well, but she's sounded a lot of people within the ECB since Mario Draghi left have come out and suggested that they're not so keen on negative rates. So perhaps we're at the lows, but there is room to go lower if they want.
Yeah, I mean, this rate hike from the Riksbank is kind of being touted by Bloomberg as a global test case. But from everything that you're saying, it sounds that it sort of isn't, because it's a little bit of an outlier, and maybe perhaps other central banks won't take any signal at all from what the Riksbank is doing.
No, I disagree with that. We're touting it as a test case because it is viewed as a test case. A lot of central banks will be monitoring this with interest, but they will also appreciate that their economies are different. But if Sweden can get back into flat zero rates and do so without any negative implications, then that will certainly feed into decisions elsewhere.
Yeah. If we look at the Bank of England as well, no change expected today. Of course, we had 2 dissenters at the last meeting. Markets are sort of skewing towards a rate cut in 2020. What would you be focusing on in today's meeting from the Bank of England, Simon, and what we can look ahead to in 2020? Obviously, Brexit, but do you think we'll see a bit more of a dovish tilt from the BOE from here?
We might well see one. Obviously, the markets are certainly starting to price in more dovishness, potential rate cut next year. Now we're through the Brexit storm. Questions about what fiscal support the new Conservative government will provide, whether that will reduce the need for the Bank of England to act. But yeah, certainly looking for some dovishness today.
And what about from the Bank of Japan? I mean, Haruhiko Kuroda did use the word easing several times in his news conference, but Bloomberg Economics expects the Bank of Japan to remain on hold through 2020. Is that something that the Bank of Japan is likely to do, given that fiscal stimulus is doing a little bit of the heavy lifting?
Well, certainly that's the call of the Bloomberg Economics economists. There are smarter people than me there. The feeling of the Bank of Japan again is that it's tried a lot of ammunition. It's now hoping that the fiscal policy will come together, and we've seen that stimulus package from Abe's government at the same time with. We're starting to see a little bit of a brightening outlook. So yeah, the pressure on the central bank to cut again is perhaps not there for the moment. Whether it will be, we'll have to see that be something develop in 2020.
Bloomberg Economics executive editor Simon Kennedy, great to have you with us, talking us through the Riksbank decision and the implications for other central banks around the world as the Riksbank hiking rates 25 basis points to come out of negative territory for the first time in almost 5 years is seen as a bit of an experiment, a global test case for other central banks looking to exit negative rates. Thank you to Simon Kennedy. Let's get the global news now with Leanne Gerrans. Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. President Trump warns Democrats they have committed political suicide by voting to impeach him. The House voted last night to impeach the president on charges of abuse of power and obstructing Congress. The votes won the support of almost every Democrat, but not a single Republican. The battle now moves to a trial in the Republican-controlled Senate. The president's expected to be acquitted. In other news, a 7-day state of emergency has been declared in New South Wales and Australia. It comes amid fears that a record-breaking heat wave will exuberate the state's bushfire crisis. The nation endured its hottest ever day on Tuesday, but that record was smashed again yesterday, which saw an average maximum of 41.9 degrees Celsius. State authorities are currently fighting about 100 fires around Sydney, and forecasts suggest worsening conditions through the weekend. Crossing over to India, the controversial Religion-Based Citizenship Act will have to pass the scrutiny of the nation's top court. On Wednesday, the Supreme Court agreed to examine the legality following petitions filed by activists across the country. Bloomberg's Archana Chowdhury reports.
The move may calm protesters who say the law discriminates because it bars undocumented Muslims from neighboring countries from seeking citizenship, but allows in other religions. For now, the government isn't backing down, nor are the protesters. The first court hearing is due on January 22nd. Meanwhile, nationwide protests have been planned for today. In New Delhi, Archana Chaudhary, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Investors who put their money on the line to help build U.S. infrastructure deserve to be protected. That's what we do at BAM. Our unconditional guarantee means investors receive every payment of interest and principal when due, period. BAM-insured bonds have a high AA stable rating from S&P, and BAM credit profiles provide complete transparency on each and every transaction. BAM-insured bonds help build America's essential public projects. BAM, the feeling is mutual.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
You know it's out there somewhere, but you just keep missing out. I'm talking about your dream job. Now it's easier to find and land your next role with the LinkedIn app. Build connections, keep in touch, and be the first to hear about new jobs. LinkedIn has more openings than applicants. And sometimes all it takes is one LinkedIn connection to land the job that's right for you. Don't miss out. Get your next big break and find the job meant for you. Download the free LinkedIn app today.
For the independent bookseller who found you that first edition.
For the baker who brings the smell of freshly baked bread to your door.
And for the barista who never needs to ask your name.
We've all got a part to play.
Every little tap keeps your high street alive.
And helps your communities thrive.
So if you love where you live, shop small.
Shopping on your local high street can make a big difference. Shop small. Only by American Express.
At Wix, we'll create your dream kitchen from design to show-off ready and take care of everything. And now, get up to 50% off showroom kitchen units. Book your free design appointment today. Cure your house embarrassment with Wix. Selected ranges excluded. See wix.co.uk.
The extraordinary sale is now on at Bicester Village, with up to 60% off the recommended retail price at participating boutiques until the 24th of December. Enjoy luxury for less at Emma Bridgewater, The White Company, Molton Brown, The Creuset, and many more. With free parking, all-day festive dining, and restaurants open late, it's the perfect time to do your Christmas shopping. The extraordinary sale at Bicester Village.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
Catch the latest news as it happens with MSNBC on TuneIn. From American politics to global events, when breaking news hits, you'll never miss a moment again. Search MSNBC on TuneIn to hear the latest.
Far wing, elevates, triple bucket.
The war of the crowd. The shot clock ticks down. Will the ball go in? The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. And the replays just don't cut it.
The sideline, the man bleeds for three.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season streaming live, so you can be there when it matters most. Hear it now, hear it live on TuneIn.
Fake in the lane, turnaround jumper from 8 feet is good on the
Search
right
NBA today to start listening.
Lines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, European equities are moving lower following a similar trading day in Asia. We're seeing the Stock 600 and the FTSE currently down 0.1%, the DAX lower by 0.4%, the CAC 40 down 0.2%. US futures are fairly flat as investors shrug off that vote in the US House to impeach President Trump. Also, not a lot of movement in individual stocks. I am keeping a close eye on chip makers, though, after US firm Micron Technology gave a fairly robust outlook. It suggested it is through the worst of the slump in the memory chip industry. If we look at some of the European players, not seeing much of a reaction there. Infineon and ST Micro both unchanged. AMS actually trading slightly lower this morning. Now, 10-year Treasury yields are currently up more than a basis point at 1.93% following yesterday's rally. We're seeing 10-year bond yields also ticking higher, up 2 basis points at negative 23. 10-year gilt yields higher by a basis point at 79 basis points. But what I'm really keeping an eye on this morning were the 10-year Aussie yields that are really on a tear, up 6 basis points to 1.27% after better than expected jobs data lowered bets on another RBA rate cut. That also boosted the Aussie this morning, currently up 0.3% against a greenback, rallying against all its G10 peers, really. Now, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is unchanged this morning. The yen holding at 109 after the BOJ stood pat on policy this morning. The euro, meanwhile, bid at 111. Sterling higher by 0.2% at 131. Gold still trading sideways at $1,476 a troy ounce. But if you ask the North American Trading Central, we could see a huge reversal for bullion very soon. So do keep an eye on that. Finally, WTI crude moving slightly lower, just below $61 a barrel. Brent just above $66 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. We'll start with some breaking news this half hour. Spain can't bar jailed Catalan leader from EU Parliament seat. That's according to the breaking news lines we're having. The EU court says jailed Catalan MEP has a parliamentary immunity. And this comes after he was elected in May while awaiting trial for his role in an illegal Catalan independence referendum in 2017. And we'll bring you more on that throughout the morning. In France, President Emmanuel Macron has signalled a willingness to improve on his prison reforms plan. That's in an effort to end a standoff with unions. Strikes across the nation are entering their third week. The government is seeking a truce during the holiday period, but the unions want President Macron to back down. And so it's Christmas next week. But on this day in history, Ebenezer Scrooge, Tiny Tim, and the ghost of Christmas first appeared when Charles Dickens' story, A Christmas Carol, was published. That was all the way back in 1843. And amazingly, he penned the classic tale in just 6 weeks in an effort to get it out for the holiday season. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garens. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Yeah, and amazing. It's one of those tales that's so well known that even if you haven't read it, you feel like you have. I have to admit, I haven't read it. You know what, though? I used to go carol singing around my neighbourhood when I was younger, Leanne.
Oh, wow, so did I. But I've got a really bad voice. I felt like I never got any money and they just closed the door. Because it was they were all Ebenezer Scrooges.
Oh, dear. I used to make a lot of money. I would make £200.
Naira change. I feel like
a lot for a 15-year-old.
Yes, it was. I should have taken like a ghetto blaster with me back in the 80s. Could have got me more than my
Back in the 80s? You were a teenager in the 80s. What?
90s, born in the 80s. I'm aging myself, yeah.
All right.
You know, I'm only 21.
Leanne Garens with the World News. Thank you so much. Let's get to our guest for the rest of the hour, Simon Wells, Chief European Economist at HSBC, with us in the London studio. Great to have you with us, Simon. Thank you so much for joining, and a great day to have you here because so many central banks to look at. We just had the Riksbank earlier this hour, of course, raising its repo rate 25 basis points, exiting negative rates for the first time in almost 5 years. We look ahead to the BOE. We had the BOJ earlier in the Asian session. Before we get into the details of all of those, how positive are you feeling about global growth in 2020?
Well, I think it's going to slow, unfortunately. But, I mean, if you look at some of the major growth engines, the US, the question is how resilient can the consumer be? We know that the investment trend is slowing. If we look at China, just how proactive will they be on monetary policy to reflate things? And in Europe, of course, we're probably just going to muddle along, but perhaps we are past the worst. So when you look at the annual growth numbers, they're probably going to slow. But if you look at the quarterly growth numbers as we go through the year, there is some cause for optimism that they might start to pick up a little bit.
So what does that mean for central bank action then? Are we basically on hold with most of the major central banks, or do we see an easing bias? You mentioned the PBOC and monetary policy. I was reading a column the other day that was saying actually the Fed and the PBOC are in quite a similar position in that they're both on hold, but potentially with an easing bias.
I think certainly with the PBOC, an easing bias is the right way to be, given how growth is slowing, and given that they've actually got stuff they can do. Yeah. I mean, yes, of course, the Fed can cut rates again, but I think for the rest of the world, Japan, Europe, even to some degree the UK, given where monetary policy is, the hurdle for further easing is going to be very, very high, and therefore it's no surprise we're seeing all these central banks trying to divert the heavy lifting towards fiscal policy.
Yeah, and with the Riksbank today, I mean, we're touting it at Bloomberg as sort of a global test case for exiting negative rate territory. Does the decision today, the hike in rates, that of course was completely expected and not a surprise at all, tell us that if you look at the US, the UK, Australia, lower bound is zero and no lower?
I think what it tells you is something different for the 5 or 4 central banks now that are in negative rates to the ones that are not in negative rates. So the reasons for Sweden exiting the policy are in some sense Swedish specific. Yes. The weak krona, the financial stability part of the mandate, the fact that they've had a housing boom and correction, and the politics of it all. Our Swedish economist yesterday was telling me that their central bank officials have to travel with guards at the moment.
Wow.
Negative rates are so unpopular there.
They've also had a pickup in inflation, to be fair.
They have, but it's come quite late in the day, given that it's a 5-year experiment. So I think that perhaps the reasons for today's move are largely Swedish specific. The lessons for the other central banks that aren't in negative rates are, 1, you might need a guard to transport you around the country if you do this, given how unpopular it will be. 2, inflation might respond a little bit, but it's certainly not been a great success. I think we could probably agree on that. And the third thing is, growth was good, but a lot of it was residential housing investment as a result of the housing boom from the very, very low interest rates. And of course, Sweden has very, very high levels of household debt globally. So I think there are lessons there. It's probably, if you're there, you're stuck. If you're not in negative territory, maybe don't go there.
Got it. So the lesson, if you're not in negative territory, don't go there. The lesson for if you are in negative territory, you said you're stuck. So let's just look at the ECB for a second. What's the next move for you through 2020? Do we just see an ECB on hold? Do we see another cut even as Christine Lagarde acknowledges the challenges of negative rates? What do we see from the ECB?
I think they could cut 10 or 20 basis points more, but as I said before, the hurdle is going to be so high. What Lagarde wants to do is stay on hold for as long as possible, try and unify this divided governing council, and place most of the action or emphasis this year on the strategic review, which is going to be her first big baby, if you like. But I mean, who really believes that European economics problems are to do with the fact that the ECB's policy rate is 10 basis points too high, and if they were to reduce it, it was going to make a huge difference? I've not spoken to anyone who thinks that. So given the unpopularity, the potential for adverse effects, I mean, sure, if they start to forecast inflation at 1.3 or something, they're going to have to act. They're never going to wave the white flag of surrender. But I think, the central case is very much on hold.
Yeah, let's talk about the Bank of England. Andrew Sentence was in the studio with me just a little earlier. He, of course, thinks that the Bank of England has made a mistake in not actually hiking rates sooner, and he thinks they need to start to position for that now. Of course, the market is actually pricing at least one cut in 2020. We had 2 dissenters voting for a cut in 2020. Andrew Sentence, by the way, said don't pay too much attention to the dissenters. It doesn't tell you a whole lot. So what are your prospects for the Bank of England in 2020? Is it hold with an easing bias and potentially a cut?
So, Andrew was on the MPC when I was there and used to brief him. In some ways, he's at least consistent. And some of the arguments he makes, I think, are very valid. But at the same time, you've got to remember that when he was at the bank, he didn't manage to bring the rest of the committee on board with his viewpoint. And I'm afraid for him, I think, nor is he going to this time round either.
And maybe why he says ignore the dissenters. But anyway, carry on.
Yeah. But what the Bank of England does, I mean, for all the flexibility in terms of bringing inflation back, it targets 2% inflation over a 2 to 3 year horizon. If you look at the weak underlying data, a post-election bounce would have to be enormous to send the UK back to decent levels of growth. There's mixed data on the labour market, but it might be getting worse. Sterling is now 3% higher than it was in November. That's enough probably to take the Bank of England's inflation forecast down to 1% in the middle of this year. Given that there's an inflation targeting mandate, I think there's a very good chance they will cut unless we get a bigger fiscal stimulus than the government is currently planning in its manifesto, or if if we get a massive post-election bounce.
All right, so a cut on the card. Simon Wells, Chief European Economist at HSBC. Great to have you with us in the studio today. Thank you so much. Daybreak Europe continues in the next hour. Eric Lonergan from M&G Investments, macro fund manager there, will be joining my colleagues in the studio, or joining Caroline Hepker in the studio. We are almost an hour into the equity market open here in Europe. 2 days of declines followed now by muted gains that have been given up. We're flat on the stock 600. This is Bloomberg.
Why do so? You know it's out there somewhere, but you just keep missing out. I'm talking about your dream job. Now it's easier to find and land your next role with the LinkedIn app. Build connections, keep in touch, and be the first to hear about new jobs. LinkedIn has more openings than applicants. And sometimes all it takes is one LinkedIn connection to land the job that's right for you. Don't miss out. Get your next big break and find the job meant for you. Download the free LinkedIn app today.
I've always loved a kitchen experiment, especially smoothies. I've blended all sorts of mad combinations. Strawberry and charcoal, broccoli and chocolate. Not my best, that. But when I test blenders in the Witch Lab, it's not about flavour, it's about performance. Our tests use proper tough stuff, hard ice, strong veg, rough nuts. And the blenders that can hack it are the only ones we recommend for your kitchen.
Which tests harder so you can buy smarter. Visit which.co.uk.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
The financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
External pressure is going to be an opportunity for reform in China. I think liquidity more generally across financial markets is an issue and a concern.
The Spanish banks in particular are in a much better place than they were 5 years ago.
It wouldn't be great to have a drawn-out trade conflict with the US or indeed with anybody else.
I've never been one to prophesy where sterling will be, and you're a madman if you think you can.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe on Bloomberg Radio.
A very good morning from London. I'm Caroline Hepker. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe live on London DAB Digital Radio. So it is a big day for central banks. So I'll break the news line out of Norges Bank this morning. As expected, the Norwegian Central Bank maintains its key interest rate at 1.5%. So that was widely expected. But this perhaps was not. So Germany is to issue green bonds for the first time in the second half of 2020. So this is obviously the European push towards more in green investments. Well, now we have it. Germany issuing green bonds for the first time later in 2020, second half of 2020. So that's quite interesting. Let me also take you through the markets this hour. We're an hour into European equity trading. We're up at 1/10% this morning on the US stock 600. The FTSE 100 also gains 1/10%. But look, it's pretty slow. We're pre the holiday period here in Europe, and the markets also showed very little reaction to the impeachment of President Donald Trump in the US. What is moving, though, at the moment, Clariant gaining 3.5% as the US's Poly One is to buy Clariant's additives unit for about $1.5 billion. The unit makes pigments for colour parts that go into vehicles and packaging, things like that. So it's a reasonably big deal. As for US futures right now, after the S&P yesterday closed little change for a second day in a row, well, we're negative at the moment for US futures. And in terms of the bond markets, as I say, the big day is in central banks. The Bank of Japan, for example, standing pat, leaving interest rates unchanged there, and also the Riksbank raising rates to 0 as expected. So the big one that we've been watching. In terms of the fixed income markets, US benchmark yields at 1.94%. So we gained 2 basis points there. German benchmark yields also up 2.5 basis points at -22, and we're actually up for yields across Europe. So the biggest jump we see in Italian BTPs, they gain 5.5 basis points to 1.39% this morning. And And then just lastly in the markets, I'll give you a check of the pound, which sort of is up to 0.2%. So actually gaining after we saw the sell-off yesterday. So we trade at 1.31 against the US dollar. Bloomberg dollar spot index flat, and oil also steady after we had the report yesterday about inventories in the US. The WTI crude at $60.84, so down 0.1%. The US government reporting a surprise drawdown in crude inventories yesterday. Okay, so that's a look at the markets and all of the breaking news. Let's pick up on that really in terms of the Norges Bank decision to stand pat as expected at 1.5%, and then Sweden's Riksbank bidding farewell to negative interest rates, because we're also watching out for the Bank of England, which will make its decision later at 12 noon London time. Our next guest says that the debate in monetary policy is now around the question of where the reversal rate stands. Joining me in the London studio, Eric Lonergan, who is macro fund manager at M&G Investments. Really good to see you. So look, where the Riksbank goes in terms of normalising, does the ECB follow, or is Sweden just idiosyncratic?
It may be, but I think it may be an important signal to central banks elsewhere in the world, because the Riksbank in Sweden has more experience now of negative interest rates than virtually any other economy or any other large economy in the world. And the verdict is a pessimistic one. I mean, really what they're saying is if you just looked at their economy, you wouldn't really be raising interest rates, but they are desperate to get away from negative interest rates because they are concerned about the consequences and the side effects, and not really convinced that it's been a constructive stimulus to the economy. That's very, very important because, in a sense, the scope of options to central banks, if you remove negative interest rates as an option, what are they going to do? And also, how do you think about pricing bonds? If interest rates can't really go any lower but can only go higher, you need to change the risk premium that's embedded in the bond market.
Okay, so that would mean a significant change. But is that really something that's going to happen in 2020? And also, the ECB's Christine Lagarde, obviously, with the review of policy at the European Central Bank, is that something that is going to be debated and then result in any actual change?
Well, it may do. I mean, I think the last meeting, the policy moves that Mario Draghi introduced, particularly the combination of cutting the interest rate on TLTROs and raising the interest rate on reserves, which apologise to listeners because it gets very technical and complicated, but that is a policy of dual interest rates. I think that's extremely important and very underappreciated.
Okay, why?
Well, because put very simplistically, the problem with negative interest rates, for example, with a single interest rate, is the obvious one. Great for borrowers. The problem is, what about all the savers who get income on deposits, right? So they're losing income. And that's why there's this concept of a reversal rate, that at some point it actually affects those savers more than it boosts the borrowers. Yeah. Right? That's a problem.
Put it under the bed instead.
Exactly. So think of it like this, though. What if I raise the interest rates on deposits and cut the interest rates on loans? Everyone's a winner, right? So you can't argue with that. But you go, well, but how can you do that? Well, that's effectively what the ECB did at its last meeting under Draghi. They actually raised the interest rate on tiered reserves, which basically banks deposits with the central bank, and they cut the interest rate on TLTROs. If you do that, and you do that more aggressively, that is unbelievably powerful. So I think this strategic review by the ECB is far more important than people realize. I don't just think it's a cosmetic exercise. And I think they're starting to see that they actually have much more power at their disposal. And markets are going to have to try and understand that. But that is a big, big shift in the way monetary policy works.
Yeah, it certainly is. What about, though, the Bank of England? Because we were speaking to Andrew Sentence earlier this morning. He's a former MPC member, 2006 to 2011, I'm sure you know him, and he was saying that the Bank of England has basically missed the boat when it comes to normalising. He was saying that it should have been done in the 2010s, that sort of time frame. What do you think the Bank of England is going to do? And also, we're going to be under a new governor next year.
I don't agree. The problem is that it's all very well to say, I'd like interest rates to be higher. Who wouldn't? The problem is whether the economy can cope with it. And if you're going to raise interest rates, you have to have an alternative. I don't hear him advocating dual interest rates in the UK. I think, to be honest, the Bank of England has slightly got behind the curve in terms of monetary innovation. So I think what the ECB is, the TFS scheme could be used in a much more enlightened enlightened fashion. If they extended the maturity, they made them targeted loans. You may remember this was the term funding scheme. It's analogous to it's effectively the equivalent of the ECB's TLTRO. So I think the Bank of England could do something very similar to the ECB, and maybe this new government could initiate it, where you get a strategic review of monetary policy, and they think about how can we. There is a crisis in central banking. If negative rates don't work, which is what the Riksbank is saying, what are central banks going to do?
Yeah.
They don't have any more options. QE from here is a waste of time. Forward guidance a waste of time. Negative interest rates are counterproductive. So are they just out of a job? That's quite important.
Yes,
so I think the Bank of England should take a lead from the ECB and should say, let's have a proper review. Can we introduce dual interest rates, or do we need coordinated fiscal and monetary policy? Are we going to do helicopter money? Those are actually the big debates. And frankly, what they could have done in 2010 is irrelevant. And I don't really hear the Bank of England leading on those discussions, and they should be.
Okay, interesting. We'll see what the new Bank of England governor is meant to be hearing this week. It's going to be, but obviously it's Thursday today. What about stock markets? I just want to have a quick thought from you in terms of the bull run that we've seen so far this year. Does it continue into next year? We're taking a little pause, but we're still basically at record highs for global equities right now.
Well, we are for the S&P 500, and we're a long way from global highs outside of the S&P. If you look at Chinese equities, you look across Asia, you look at European equities, have done nothing for over a decade. They're down in real terms. The FTSE, I think that's largely an S&P story, and it's also worth bearing in mind that last year was a pretty brutal year for the S&P. If you take it back to from January 18, it's not up that much. So I think you can still be very constructive on the equity market. From the way we've been running portfolios, we added an awful lot of risk in the sort of August-September phase. We've removed some, but we're still broadly positive on the outlook for risk assets, including equities.
Okay, great stuff. Well, thank you very much for joining me today. That's Eric Lonergan, who is a macro fund manager at M&G Investments. I almost credited you to Bloomberg. Thank you, Eric, so much for your time. Let's cross over now to Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans, who is standing by with all the world and national news. Good morning.
Good morning, Carolina. We'll start with one of our top stories. The U.S. House of Representatives has voted to impeach Donald Trump for abuse of power and obstructing Congress. This makes him only the third U.S. president to be sanctioned by lawmakers. The articles of impeachment will now be turned over to the Senate for trial. For more on this, Bloomberg's senior international editor, that's Jody Schneider, joins us now. Jody, after this vote, the Senate trial will happen, but President Trump is unlikely to be convicted.
That's right. He has basically been... The House acts as the prosecutor, so they went ahead and determined the grounds for impeachment. In this case, they impeached on 2 counts, on abuse of power and obstructing Congress. The Senate then acts effectively as the jury. It will hold a trial early next year to determine whether President Trump should be convicted on the charges and removed from office. It requires a 2/3 vote of the full Senate, and given that Republicans hold the majority in that chamber, it is very, very, very unlikely that will happen. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has already declared that he is not an impartial juror, and he wants a swift conclusion to those proceedings. One of the things we saw in the House vote was that how much the Republicans are standing by President Trump. Not a single House Republican voted for impeachment.
And Jody, we actually had live reaction from the president. He was at a rally in Michigan. And what was his response to this impeachment vote?
Yeah, well, first of all, that timing of the rally didn't appear to be coincidental. President Trump, of course, knew the vote would be taking place at that time. And so there was this split screen image of the vote on one side happening and the president taking the stage to cheering supporters in Michigan, which was a state that was crucial to his victory in 2016 and would be again to his chances for re-election next year. In effect, he offered this real-time rebuttal to impeachment, saying that the Democrats had conducted a sinister witch hunt, hoax, scams, and that voting to impeach him was really their desire to nullify the last election. So he and Republican leaders throughout the whole impeachment proceedings, the whole process, have portrayed this as a partisan witch hunt, and he's taken no responsibility for the charges that have been brought against him.
He also attacked the move, calling it suicide for the Democrats. Bloomberg senior international editor Jody Schneider there. Thank you so much. We'll bring you more on that story throughout the morning. Now to other news. And in Australia, a 7-day state of emergency has been declared in New South Wales. It comes amid fears that a record-breaking heat wave will exuberate the state's bushfire crisis. The nation endured its hottest day ever on Tuesday, but that record was smashed again yesterday, which saw an average maximum of 41.9 degrees Celsius. Crossing over to Europe, French President Emmanuel Macron is signalling willingness to improve his pension reform plan in an effort to end a standoff with unions, which is entering its third week. Bloomberg's James Regan has more.
The government plans to hold further discussions with union leaders on Thursday after talks with Prime Minister Edouard Philippe on Wednesday failed to ease opposition to the proposals. 2 opinion polls show that the portion of people who are against the reforms has risen to 57%, while support for the protests is stable at 54%. In Paris, James Regan, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Russia's President Vladimir Putin gives his annual press conference, and that's actually happening this hour. He'll take several dozen questions while almost 2,000 journalists will be present in a giant hall in Moscow's business center. It is likely to last for several hours. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans, with the world news there. Now, still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we're going to take a look at income inequality with Bloomberg opinion columnist Leonid Bershidsky. And you can listen back to a selection of our interviews at BloombergRadio.com or on your Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Inovalon is a leading provider of cloud-based platforms empowering data-driven healthcare. Leveraging deep connectivity, the data of billions of medical events, and advanced analytics, Inovalon empowers the achievement of improved clinical outcomes and financial performance for thousands of health insurance companies, hospitals, doctors, pharmacies, and pharmaceutical companies, and the millions of patients they serve every day. Inovalon. Data has a story to tell. We give it a voice. Learn more at Inovalon.com.
You know your body, and you know when something's off. When something doesn't feel quite right. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, rashes, and fever. They could be signs of lupus. Listen to your body. Take care of yourself. We're here to help you take control of your health. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Briggs.
Hotel chains and home-sharing sites have been encroaching on each other's turf, and the latest player to blur the line is hospitality startup Sonder. Its model is a mix between WeWork and Airbnb. Now, with a $1 billion valuation, Sonder is making a move into traditional hotels. I spoke to Sonder CEO Francis Stevenson on Tuesday about the business model and how he plans to make Sonder stand out.
The way that Sonder works is by partnering with developers, and effectively we lease buildings. Last quarter, about 72% of the properties we took on was the entire building we managed. The idea is that we make spaces really attractive for travelers. It's kind of a next generation hotel experience, one which usually offers you an apartment, a studio, a multi-bedroom apartment sometimes, and also recently actual hotel rooms. We use a lot of technology to make the experience really frictionless.
So very competitive space. Is the technology why I would use Sonder instead of someone else?
I think it really, there's $1 trillion a year that's spent on accommodations globally, and, there's a lot of players. Marriott, the biggest in the world, has just a 4% market share, so there's a wide range of choices that consumers have. I think at the end of the day, what they love about what we offer is that they get a really attractive, sizable property for a cost that's usually a fraction of a hotel room.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, it's a bit of a mixed trading day here in Europe. We're seeing the Stock 600, FTSE and CAC 40 all fairly flat. The DAX, meanwhile, sliding 0.3%. US futures unchanged, with investors really shrugging off yesterday's vote in the US House to impeach President Trump. Meanwhile, government yields are rallying this morning. We're seeing 10-year Treasury yields up 3 basis points at 1.94%. 10-year bond yields gaining 2 basis points to negative 22. 10-year gilt yields higher by 3 basis points to 80 basis points. In currencies, it's all about the Aussie dollar this morning. It's rallied against all its G10 peers following better than expected jobs data. That's reduced bets for another rate cut next year, sending the Aussie up 0.3% against the greenback. The Bloomberg dollar spot index is unchanged. The yen also holding at 109.6. The euro is bid at 111. Sterling gaining 0.2% to 1.31 ahead of today's BOE rate decision. Gold still trading sideways at $1,474 a troy ounce. But if you ask the North American Trading Central, we could see a huge reversal for bullion coming very soon. So a bit to look out for there. Finally, WTI crude holding just below $61 a barrel. Brent just above $66 a barrel. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Just going to bring you up to date with some of that breaking news we had out of Spain earlier. Europe's top court says an imprisoned Catalan leader has parliamentary immunity. That's after Oriol Junqueras was sentenced to 13 years in jail for his part in the 2017 independence referendum. It could have an impact on Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's attempts to form a government. He's trying to convince the Catalan Separatist Party to support him. Scotland's First Minister is claiming the mandate for a new independence referendum is now unarguable. Nicola Sturgeon is expected to publish a paper setting out a case for a second vote. The SNP won 48 seats in last week's general election. And finally, do you want to live longer? Well, going to the theatre once every month may slash your risk of premature death, according to a new study. University College London researchers tracked nearly 7,000 adults over the age of 50. That was for 12 years. Volunteers who engaged with the arts every few months were 14% less likely to die by the end of the study. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
Now it's 9:20 a.m. here in the City of London, and time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Leonid Bershidsky, who's been writing about income inequality and why wealth taxes are not an effective way to fix the problem. Leonid, welcome to the programme. Thanks for joining me. So look, you're arguing against sort of flashy wealth taxes, that they don't cut inequality. It's all about a progressive income tax policy, higher consumption taxes, basically. So what? The European model?
Yes, exactly. First of all, thanks for having me. The European countries have tried wealth taxes extensively, and a couple of dozen countries had a wealth tax in 1985. Now only 4 have one in Europe, and that's Switzerland, Norway, Belgium, and Spain. There's also sort of a wealth tax. It's billed as a capital gains tax, but it's sort of a wealth tax in the Netherlands as well. So most of these countries have tried it and dropped it for the main reason that it was really hard to administer, and it didn't bring in enough money to redistribute and to actually do anything about inequality.
Yeah. Yes, which is really fascinating. And I guess, the aim partly of your piece is around the wealth taxes that are being put forward by some of the Democratic potential candidates for the presidency in 2020. Is that the main target?
Two of the main Democratic candidates, Senators Warren and Sanders, have proposed big wealth taxes, and actually there's been a recent paper from New York University where they tried to calculate the amount of money that Warren's wealth tax would bring in, and it's a huge amount of money. It's more than $300 billion, but it still doesn't move the needle on inequality. Even that huge amount doesn't really change anything about the distribution of wealth in the U.S. You need to make the wealth tax really confiscatory. You need to take away, half the assets from the wealthy to, for the needle to move even a little bit.
But my point also, though, is that it's not just in the US, is it? I mean, we've just come through an election period here in the UK where on the left, yes, admittedly, they failed spectacularly to get into power, but there was an idea of a wealth tax here in the UK from the Labour Party. So it's not like the idea of a tax on the super wealthy, is just a distant memory, right? It still comes up in many countries.
Yeah, it's around because it's a very attractive idea and simple to explain. You take rich people's property, you take it away, and you redistribute it to the poorer people. What can be simpler than that as a concept? But the thing is, even despite the high levels of inequality seen in a lot of countries in the U.S. and in the UK, among others, is that the rich do not have enough money to make the condition of the poor noticeably better.
Yeah. But it's all about that kind of progressive tax system, I suppose. Yeah, I mean, and you point out, I think rightly so, that VAT, value-added tax here in Europe, is really very high. It can be almost 22% in some countries. So actually, that's the way that a lot of governments sort of scrape in a lot of money. Look, Leonid, really great read. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. That's Bloomberg opinion columnist Leonid Bershitsky. And you can read more on that piece and lots of other stories from Bloomberg Opinion at bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal just by typing in OPIN GO. So good to have you, Leonid. Right, we're going to preview the Bank of England next. Of course, they're expected to stand pat to hold interest rates at the 75 basis point level. It follows the BOJ also keeping rates on hold. But we'll look ahead to the Bank of England decision later this lunchtime. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. Scott Boras showed up at baseball's winter meetings with his own press conference backdrop. Boras, with his high-profile clients, courted by powerful owners and a polarizing figure for fans, baseball's most famous agent negotiated $814 million of contracts in little over 3 days last week. All told, he projects his deals will top $1.2 billion and lift his career agreements past $9 billion. A Utah Jazz fan who was banned for life from Vivint Smart Home Arena is now suing Houston Rockets star Russell Westbrook for $100 million for emotional distress. The NBA star says Shane Keisel made racial and inappropriate remarks at him when he played for Oklahoma City. Toyota confirmed that it will be part of the advertising lineup for Super Bowl 54 on Fox TV. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
In today's volatile markets, investors need resilient portfolios to help handle the pressure. Through decades of expansions and recessions and changing interest rates, clients have turned to PIMCO to help them stay on course, no matter what course markets take. PIMCO, active fixed income solutions that aim to give investors an edge. All investments contain risk and may lose value. Investing in the bond market is subject to risks. Consult your investment professional prior to making an...
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can feel your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Batteries running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
Ho, ho, ho. Who's made a list this year?
I want a new phone. One with amazing cameras, ultra-wide lens, of course, live focus video. Well, it has to be 5G ready to stream all my films. Can it come with something awesome to listen to them through?
Darling, I think he was talking to the kids.
Get everything you want and more. Purchase a Samsung 5G ready device and claim a pair of silver wireless Galaxy Buds at no extra cost. Shop our 5G handsets in store or online at your local O2 store or o2.co.uk. 18 plus. Offer excludes Galaxy Fold 5G. Purchased by the 25th of the 12th 19. Claim from Samsung within 30 days. T's and C's apply.
19p? What will that get you at Christmas? 5 minutes to Panto, a very unpopular Secret Santa. This week at Tesco, you can get sprouts, carrots or parsnips from just 19p. Our festive 3. That should get you on the nice list. Tesco, delivering Christmas for 100 years. Selected stores excludes Express, ends 26th of December.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
Live to London on DAB Digital Radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And it's 9:30 a.m. here in London, 10:30 in Berlin, and across Europe this morning. A very good morning. I'm Caroline Hepker. So we check the markets for you every 15 minutes, and it's really all about central banks today. So the Riksbank raising its rates to zero as expected. The Swedish krona this morning has been holding on to gains against the euro on that decision. We also had the Bank of England leaving rates unchanged, and then we have the Bank of Japan leaving rates unchanged, and the Bank of England is coming up at 12 noon. So we're going to talk a little bit about Mark Carney and what might happen there. But just some breaking news lines that are happening here in the UK. 9:30 a.m. So we get the retail sales numbers. So we see what the excluding auto fuels, the month-on-month number is actually a drop of 0.6%. So that's excluding fuels, the month-on-month number. The retail sales number overall drops 0.4% versus the previous 3 months. So that's the line from the retail sales figures. Yeah, so we had expected an increase of 0.2%, but we actually get a November retail sales drop of 0.6%. So it really shows you just how much the British consumer is in the doldrums. Let me also take you to the rest of the markets then. In terms of the European stocks, US Stock 600 right now flat, FTSE 100 gains 0.1%, ZDAX in negative territory down 0.2%. We had a fairly negative overnight session in Asia, a bit of a pre-holiday lull, and also kind of, I guess we're coming off the highs that we've seen in terms of global equities. As for the bond market, markets at the moment, again ahead of all of these central bank decisions. 1.94% for US benchmark yields, up 3 basis points. German yields at negative 22 basis points, again there also of 3 basis points. So we're high in terms of European yields across the board. And as for the FX base, British pound at 1.3098, a gain of 1/10 of 1%. The euro also higher, 1/10 of 1%. So those are the markets and all of the breaking news. Now, the Bank of England looks set to keep interest rates on hold today in the first meeting since Boris Johnson's decisive election victory. But there is mounting speculation that policymakers will ease policy in 2020. For more on this, I'm joined by Bloomberg Economics' UK economist Dan Hansen. Really good to talk to you, Dan. So there's a lot of focus on these dissenters, on whether there may be more than just two dissenting voices, even though we're expecting a hold basically today.
Yeah, that's right. So in November we had a surprise vote split. We had Jonathan Haskell and Michael Saunders both going for a rate cut. We think they'll do the same again today. The run of data since November has probably been on the weak side. I mean, we've seen the retail sales numbers this morning, but I think the GDP numbers as well will be very much in the minds of those two policymakers. And the labour market as well. The most recent data, it looked like it's stabilised a little bit, but there is some residual weakness there. So you bring it all together and we think both Haskell and Saunders will go for a cut. We don't think any other members will go for a cut just yet, just because of what could potentially be coming in 2020.
Yeah.
But the dovish bias on the bank is definitely going to be there.
Is that more Brexit uncertainty, or is that the global slowdown, or a global slowdown?
So it's a lot of things. So on Brexit uncertainty, our view is that despite all the headlines over the past couple of days about Johnson legislating the cliff edge and saying that the possibility of a no deal in 2020, we think the worst forms of Brexit, the most disorderly forms of Brexit, are now off the table because the withdrawal bill is likely to go through in January. So there is at the margin a fall in uncertainty in the very near term. You've also got a looser fiscal policy coming through. The Conservative government have said they're going to open the spending taps. And we also think the global economy will probably be a little bit more stable in 2020. So actually, our view is that the risks are probably more balanced around the 2020 outlook than investors currently see. And we actually expect the bank to remain on hold over the course of next year. Though that said, we don't exclude a dovish surprise today.
Yeah, okay. Money market seeing an 80% probability of a cut, 25 basis points in December 2020. So not until the back end, certainly, of next year. Look, an interesting point was made by Eric Lonergan, who is from M&G Investments. He was speaking to me just earlier this hour. He was talking about perhaps the ECB idea of a wholesale review at the Bank of England might be a good idea. And we are, expecting to hear who the new Bank of England governor is going to be, taking over from Mark Carney. I mean, I thought that was quite an interesting idea. Is that, could it happen basically as we debate this idea around negative interest rates, around, how quickly you can kind of get back to normalisation and raising rates around the world? Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, with a new Bank of England, announcements around a new Bank of England governor imminent, it's quite possible that comes. I think the interesting thing about the Bank of England is, when you compare it, especially to the Fed and the British economy to the US economy, is that at least through the lens of the labour market, the UK looks very similar to the US. The labour market is extremely tight, yet the Fed has managed to lift rates. Okay, it pushed rates back down over the course of this year, but the Bank of England has been stuck, and its stance is still, when you look at it, take a sort of longer look at it, the stance of the Bank of England is still extremely accommodative, especially relative to, for example, the Fed. So the Bank of England really is in a tough position, because if a real downturn hits, sort of a recession type downturn, it needs a lot more space than it has to deal with it. So a review would be helpful to look at what other tools the Bank of England could draw on beyond interest rates, beyond QE, to actually ward off a more severe downturn, and a lot more severe than what we're talking about at the moment. We're really just talking about a slowdown in growth at the moment. Yeah, okay, great stuff. Well, we'll see what happens, and indeed who is picked as the new Bank of England governor. Thank you so much to Bloomberg Bloomberg Economics' UK economist Dan Hansen for joining us in the London radio studio. Let's get all the latest in global news headlines now. Here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Let's start with one of our top stories. President Donald Trump has been impeached. It sets the stage for a trial in the Senate where he'll almost certainly be acquitted. The vote in the House went mostly along partisan lines. There was not a single Republican vote to impeach. President Trump attacked the move, calling it suicide for the Democrats.
This lawless partisan impeachment is a political suicide march for the Democrat Party. Have you seen my polls in the last 4 weeks?
Crossing over to Europe, Europe's top court says an imprisoned Catalan leader has parliamentary immunity. That's after Oriol Junqueras was sentenced to 13 years in jail for his part in the 2017 independence referendum. It could have an impact on Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez's attempts to form a government. He's trying to convince a Catalan separatist party to support him. Elsewhere, Spanish riot police and Catalan separatists clashed outside a football match between Barcelona and fierce rivals Real Madrid last night. That was over the Spanish government's refusal to discuss the region's independence. Staying in Europe, French President Emmanuel Macron is signalling willingness to improve his pension reform plan in an effort to end a standoff with unions, which is now entering its third week. Bloomberg's James Regan has more.
The government plans to hold further discussions with union leaders on Thursday after talks with Prime Minister Edouard Philippe on Wednesday failed to ease opposition to the proposals. Two opinion polls show that the portion of people who are against the reforms has risen to 57%, while support for the protests is stable at 54%. In Paris, James Regan, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And Russia's President Vladimir Putin is giving his annual press conference. He'll take several dozen questions while almost 2,000 journalists will be present in a giant hall in Moscow Business Center. It's likely to last for several hours. Topics usually include economy, energy, relations with the US and other aspects of Russian foreign policy. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Caroline.
Leanne, so Putin, 20 years leading Russia?
And I think this is his 15th call-in, so it's something that he does quite regularly. And it lasts a really long time, so about 4 hours and 40 minutes has been the longest one to date. But what's really interesting is he's speaking now, as I mentioned, and he's saying that Russia will strive to minimize impact of climate change, and doing nothing about climate change is not an option, which is really interesting because obviously he's tuning into what the people are thinking, maybe a little bit of a turn.
Yeah, okay, climate change going up the list of priorities. Let's see whether the action follows to match. Thank you so much.
But we'll have to wait a long time to know where we are.
Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans there with the world news. Right, let's get a roundup of the latest US sports now. Here's Pete Fox.
Results from the night in the association. The Celtics hold on to beat the Mavericks in Dallas 109-103, led by Kemba Walker's 32 points, 5 boards, and 3 assists. In D.C., the Wizards let an 18-point lead slip against the Bulls. Chicago going on to win it in overtime, 110-109. And the Warriors came up short once again, now 5-24 after losing in Portland at the Moda Center by 10. D'Angelo Russell had 26. And on the NHL scoreboard in New Jersey, the Devils rallied after the Ducks grabbed a 1-0 lead. New Jersey would answer with 3 to win it 3-1. I'm Pete Fox. That's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
So the sports news there, central banks, that's the discussion we're going to have next. Callum Pickering, senior economist at Berenberg, joins me as we see the Riksbank heading out of negative rates. This is Bloomberg.
The possibility of lung cancer can be pretty scary, especially if you're one of approximately 8 million current or former smokers at high risk. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know that now there's a breakthrough low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early, and it only takes 60 seconds. You stop smoking, now start screening. For an easy quiz to see if you're eligible, visit SaveByTheScan.org. It could save your life. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is, your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by NHTSA.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
What? 'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can feel your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's Grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We hunt in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
Today, your information is more exposed than ever. When you shop, sign in, or browse, you could be vulnerable to cybercriminals. More online threats demand more protection. That's why new Norton 360 provides multiple layers of protection, combining device security, secure VPN, password manager, and cloud backup all in one solution. Get new Norton 360, starting at $24.99 for the first year.
You know it's out there somewhere, but you just keep missing out. I'm talking about your dream job. Now it's easier to find and land your next role with the LinkedIn app. Build connections, keep in touch, and be the first to hear about new jobs. LinkedIn has more openings than applicants. And sometimes all it takes is one LinkedIn connection to land the job that's right for you. Don't miss out. Get your next big break and find the job meant for you. Download the free LinkedIn app today.
Ho, ho, ho. Who's made a list this year?
I want a new phone, one with amazing cameras, ultra-wide lens, of course, live focus video. Well, it has to be 5G ready to stream all my films. Can it come with something awesome to listen to them through?
Darling, I think he was talking to the kids.
Get everything you want and more. Purchase a Samsung 5G ready device and claim a pair of silver wireless Galaxy Buds at no extra cost. Shop our 5G handsets in store or online at your local O2 store or o2.co.uk. 18 plus. Offer excludes Galaxy Fold 5G. Purchased by the 25th of the 12/19. Claim from Samsung within 30 days. T's and C's apply.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
He leaps and he surges in. Touchdown.
It is college football bowl season on TuneIn. This Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time, the bowl season kicks off from the beautiful Bahamas.
Back to throw, fires, run on the slant, caught, touchdown.
The Charlotte 49ers will be playing their first bowl game in school history. They'll be matched up against the Buffalo Bulls. Don't miss the first bowl game of the season. To listen to this and every bowl game, just search college football today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
With 2020 on the horizon, TuneIn continues looking back at the stories that shaped the 2010s.
In 2012, Black Lives Matter is born after the killing of an unarmed 17-year-old Trayvon Martin. In 2015, the European refugee crisis sees an unprecedented number of asylum seekers entering the EU after fleeing conflict regions like Syria. And in 2017, the Me Too movement inspires a new wave of social justice.
Search news on TuneIn to be listening when the next decade's big headlines break.
It was 1970, and a pregnant Air Force captain found herself in a bind.
If you're pregnant, you cannot be active duty. If you have a child, you cannot be active duty.
So she sued. This week on The Media examines the case that almost set the course for women's reproductive rights. Instead, to Justice Ginsburg's dismay, we got Roe v. Wade. On this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast on TuneIn today.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Sandra Kilhoff with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Now, it's a bit of a mixed trading day here in Europe. We're seeing the Stoxx 600 and the FTSE just ticking slightly higher, up 0.1%, both of them. The CAC 40, meanwhile, unchanged. The DAX lower by 0.1% in Frankfurt. US futures also looking for direction as investors are shrugging off last night's vote in the US House to impeach President Trump. Government yields, meanwhile, rallying this morning. We're seeing 10-year Treasury yields currently up 2 basis points at 1.94%. 10-year bond yields gaining 3 basis points, still at negative 22. 10-year gilt yields higher by 3 basis points, reaching 80 basis points. In currencies, it is all about the Aussie dollar this morning. It's rallied against all its G10 peers following better than expected jobs data. That's really reducing market bets for another rate cut next year, sending the Aussie up 0.3% against the greenback. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, meanwhile, unchanged. The yen holding at 109.6 after the BOJ stood pat on policy this morning. The euro is bid at 1.11 sterling, gaining 0.2% to 1.31 ahead of today's BOE rate decision. Gold still trading sideways, currently at $1,474 a troy ounce. Finally, WTI crude holding at $61 a barrel after capping its longest streak of gains in 2 months as investors weigh swelling US fuel inventories against a surprise decline in crude stockpiles. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garens with more on what's going on around the world.
Sandra, thank you. Scotland's First Minister says the mandate for a new independence referendum is now unarguable. She's publishing a paper called Scotland's Right to Choose, demanding powers to call the vote are transferred to Holyrood. SNP leader Nicola Sturgeon has been speaking in Edinburgh this morning after her party won 48 seats in last week's general election. In France, President Emmanuel Macron has signalled a willingness to improve on his pension reform plans. That's in an effort to end a standoff with unions. Strikes across the nation are now entering their third week. The government is seeking a truce during the holiday period, but the unions want President Macron to back down. And so, this time next week, Christmas will all be over. But on this day in history, Ebenezer Scrooge, Tiny Tim, and the ghosts of Christmas first appeared when Charles Dickens' story, A Christmas Carol, was published. But that was back in 1843. And amazingly, he penned the classic tale in just 6 weeks in an effort to get it out for the holiday. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on QuickTake by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Garens. This is Bloomberg Caroline.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Leanne Garens there with the world news. Now, coming up next, our colleagues in the United States are getting ready for Bloomberg Daybreak. So let's check in with Nathan Hager. Good morning, Nathan. What's ahead for you?
Well, the overriding story here in the U.S., of course, is the impeachment of an American president for only the third time in history. It is a mark on President Trump's permanent record, a huge political gamble for Democrats. But the market reaction, well, there really isn't one. The bigger story for investors this morning may be central banks. Riksbank in Sweden decided to end its negative interest rate experiment, and the Bank of England has a decision later this morning. We'll talk about it all with Drew Mattis of MetLife Investment Management. We'll preview the BOE with Bloomberg senior UK economist Dan Hansen. Plus, a perfect storm of technology and regulation have been taking a toll on Wall Street analyst jobs. One regulation in particular may be accelerating that trend. Join me and Karen Moscow for all that and more coming up on Bloomberg Daybreak. Caroline.
Great stuff. Thank you so much, Nathan. Bloomberg Daybreak with Nathan Hager and Karen Moscow is up next. But if you're listening on London DAB Digital Radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance. Nathan mentioned it, of course, the big day for central banks. The Bank of England likely to follow the BOJ in standing pat, in holding rates steady when it releases its decision at 12 p.m, so lunchtime here in the UK. Now, earlier we got some big decisions, certainly from the Riksbank. It lifted rates out of negative territory after after almost 5 years, although its Norwegian counterpart, however, also stood pat. So for more, I'm joined by Callum Pickering, senior economist at Berenberg. Very good morning to Callum. The US impeachment really hasn't done much in the markets. It's all about the central bank decisions. Just walk us through how important you actually think the Riksbank decision is, as central banks seem to be moving towards the idea of trying to escape from negative rates.
Well, we should all keep an eye on what happens now with the Riksbank and the Swedish economy. It's a kind of petri dish for the outlook for the next 12 months, the next 2 years. You have negative rates in Europe, you have negative rates in Japan, and in markets we actually see not just the benefits, but we see the costs for banks. It's very difficult to see how a central bank can justify penalising banks for dumping money at the central bank, when in fact the problem is not that they won't supply credit to the real economy, it's that no one is demanding credit. So the economics around negative rates, it's far less clear, it's far less obvious than QE or just regular rate cuts. So the key point is we look at the Swedish economy. How do banks react? How does the financial system react? Does it actually take any heat out of the economy? Probably not. And look, if things are fine in 12 months, we actually see some benefits now they've taken away the negative rates. You might see a much broader discussion in Europe, in Japan. Actually, is this making sense for us?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was really my next question around the ECB. You know, how much are they going to be watching the Riksbank? I mean, it's usually the other way around, isn't it? The SNB, the Riksbank and the others are watching the ECB and what it means for their currencies when the ECB moves. But now it could be the other way around, and how soon?
Well, the ECB has a peculiar problem in the sense that the financial system of the Eurozone is actually not in great health. There are problems with the transmission mechanism. And, of course, it's bad for banks if they have no one in the real economy to lend to, and then they lose money if they deposit their cash at the ECB. The problem is a communications one, in fact. If the ECB could clearly say, look, we're going to take this negative rate out because actually we think it's damaging banks and it's not stimulating the economy too much, then all well and good. It's very difficult for central banks to move any rates without markets seeing that as a hawkish move. So it's a real communication challenge there. I think we're well away from the ECB following the Riksbank, I have to say, but the ECB has a review coming up. Maybe negative rates is part of that.
What about this idea that I've heard from some investors of having basically dual interest rates, one for savers, one for borrowers? I mean, the TLTRO idea.
It's possible. I think monetary policy is far too complicated as it is. The bottom line is interest rates are low almost across the Western world. We face political uncertainty. There's not much a central bank can do to address that. The central bank can provide a big financial backstop to markets when they panic through liquidity provisions. And beyond that, I actually don't think we can expect much from central banks. What we should do is not try to make more sophisticated central banking tools to deal with the economic problems, but look to supply-side reform, look to fiscal policy, because those are the parts of policy which still have a lot of headroom left, and actually there are some obvious problems that you can fix.
Yeah, okay, so looking to governments then to try to respond, or at least help businesses to respond to it. What about the Bank of England then? Let's have a look at the bread and butter, really, of the decision today. I mean, we're not expecting any change, but it's all about the tone and whether we get more dissenters and whether we get more priced into the markets as for next year and the rate path ahead. I mean, Andrew Sentence, a former MPC member, was here on Bloomberg Radio just earlier this morning saying, look, December's really not the time that the Bank of England really does anything.
That's right. I don't expect much today. There won't be any policy change. The split will probably be 7-2 in favour of keeping rates on hold, with 2 dissenters in favour of cuts. I doubt the forward guidance will change, even though we have the news of the election. Perhaps it will, but base case is for the Bank of England, according to the guidance, that in an orderly Brexit scenario, gradual rate hikes ahead. And I am with them on that. I think next year markets will be surprised at how much the UK economy actually improves on the back of the election clarity, notwithstanding the risk of the hard Brexit at the end of the year, but some political certainty in the UK, a fiscal stimulus probably lifts growth momentum, and I think the Bank of England's guidance will actually come true. I think late next year we'll be thinking about when the Bank of England is going to hike interest rates. So for now, everything is on hold, and then January 31st, before Carney leaves, maybe we get a change in guidance before then.
Okay, so you sound quite positive on the UK. So some of the comments that we had from Stan Druckerman, obviously billionaire investor, and well known for his bet certainly on the pound as much as anything else. He was very positive about Brexit. He was very positive about the UK as a place for investors, and yet that doesn't seem to be how investors have behaved.
Well, for the last 3 years, we've had a lot of political nonsense in the UK, lots of uncertainty, very hard to see exactly which way Brexit is going, which way the domestic economic policy outlook is going. I would just point to three things which are now positives. First, Boris Johnson has won the election with a big majority, and we will get an orderly Brexit at the end of January. Second, we will get a fiscal stimulus. That will come through in February, and I think markets will be surprised at how big that is. It will be bigger than the fiscal stimulus set out in the Conservative Party manifesto. Third, Johnson winning the election. The flip side is Jeremy Corbyn has lost the election. Jeremy Corbyn and his policies presented on their own a risk to the UK economic outlook. The one risk that remains is the hard Brexit at the end of 2020. I think Boris is doing a little saber rattling at the moment. I think he's more pragmatic. He'll try to avoid the cliff edge at the end of 2020, and that can make way for a cyclical rebound, I think probably towards around 1.8% for the year overall next year from 1.3% this year. It's not a huge cyclical upturn, it's a little bit above trend, and all of that is happening in an economy which fundamentally is in good shape. It is well regulated, it is very pro-market, but it will suffer from leaving the EU in terms of long-term economic growth, which I think probably shaves a good 0.3, 0.4 percentage points from potential growth.
Yeah, but that's still to come, isn't it? That could be years away. Thank you so much, Callum Pickering, Senior Economist at Berenberg, for joining me this morning for the conversation as we look to the Bank of England decision, 12 noon. We'll have it here on the Bloomberg Terminal and on Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg.
Just because you travel doesn't mean you can't keep your routine. The more obstacles travel puts between us and our well-being, the more we strive to work well. At Westin Hotels and Resorts, we're focused on empowering your well-being. With Westin meetings, you work and feel your best with nutritious snacks and nourishing smoothies that give you the energy you need to power through any meeting. Don't leave your well-being behind. We give you the choice to get up or to rise. Search Westin online to find out more. Westin, let's rise.
'Tis the season to be hunched over your laptop. Not on our watch. In real life, you can fill your senses and your baskets. Feel all the sights, sounds, lols, and OMGs. Wear laughing emojis on actual smiley faces. Battery is running low. Take the kids to Santa's grotto. In real life, you can find just the right present using the most advanced search engine in the world. Your eyes. We can't in real life. Brent Cross, London. Free parking for all sleighs and cars.
You know it's out there somewhere, but you just keep missing out. I'm talking about your dream job. Now it's easier to find and land your next role with the LinkedIn app. Build connections, keep in touch, and be the first to hear about new jobs. LinkedIn has more openings than applicants. And sometimes all it takes is one LinkedIn connection to land the job that's right for you. Don't miss out. Get your next big break and find the job meant for you. Download the free LinkedIn app today.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, December 19th, 2019. Coming up this hour.
For just the third time in history, the House votes to impeach the president.
We have a flurry of central bank decisions, including the first move out of negative interest rates in half a decade.
Up next, attention turns to the Bank of England and its policy stance for the new year.
While the impeachment vote was along party lines, at least one Democrat voted present, and a Republican turned independent voted with the Democrats. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. A win for the Devils and for St. John's. And coming up, we'll hear from the new $324 million Yankee, Garrett Cole.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good Thursday morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures are a little change to higher this morning. We're coming up to 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 2 points. Dow futures up 32. NASDAQ futures up 3.5. The DAX in Germany is down about 0.2%, and the CAC in Paris and FTSE 100 little changed. Nikkei 225 in Japan was down 0.3%. So was the Hang Seng in Hong Kong. 10-year Treasury down 6/30 seconds, yield 1.93%. Yield on the 2-year 1.64%. NYMEX crude oil little changed, up 5 cents at $60.98 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 70 cents, also little changed at $14.78 an ounce. The euro 1.1137 against the dollar. The yen 109.56. Nathan.
And Karen, we begin with an historic vote on Capitol Hill. For just the third time in U.S. history, the president has been impeached. Here with the latest is Amy Morris from our Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. Almost all of the Democrats and no Republicans voted to impeach the president. The next step is a trial in the Senate, and House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff has concerns about how that might be handled.
The President of the United States should be tried, and the question is now whether Senator McConnell will allow a fair trial in the Senate.
As House members voted, President Trump was taking the stage at a campaign rally, and he says impeaching him will only strengthen his support.
I know one thing, Americans will show up by the tens of millions next year to vote Pelosi the hell out of office.
Now House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she'll wait to send over those articles of impeachment until the Senate establishes rules for the trial. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Amy, thank you. And we'll have more on that impeachment vote in just a moment. But first, we have several central bank moves to talk about, beginning in Sweden. The Riksbank ended half a decade of sub-zero easing, raising its key interest rate out of negative territory. Let's get more from Bloomberg opinion columnist Marcus Ashworth.
They can get the spectre of negative rates behind them. They tried it. It hasn't really worked for them. And they want to send a message that they're not going to muck around anymore. They're off negative rates. They're going to keep it at zero. And they wait to see what happens in the ECB.
And Sweden's benchmark rate now stands at 0, while the European Central Bank holds steady at minus 0.5%. The krona strengthened just slightly on the move as most market participants expected the hike.
Well, up next, the Bank of England issues a decision. While it's widely expected to keep rates on hold, we'll be watching for how many policymakers dissent with a call for lower rates. David Finnerty is an FX and rates strategist for Bloomberg.
I actually think 2 will come out. I wouldn't be surprised a third, maybe even an outside chance of a 4th member saying they're going to cut rates. If that happens, I think that B of E may start signaling, hey, we may be cutting a lot more before the end of next year. That market pricing, if that's the case, and then you'll see sterling sell off. Add this all together, if they want to signal a rate cut, they certainly have the evidence to do it.
Economists see just 2 members calling for lower rates, and current market pricing predicts the BOE will wait until November before cutting rates.
Overnight in Asia, the Bank of Japan left policy unchanged, but changed its statement to point to a brighter economic outlook. We get the details on that now from Bloomberg's Brian Fowler in Tokyo.
The BOJ said that while overseas risks remain high, they no longer kept the assessment that such risks were increasing. And this is definitely a nod to the Phase 1 trade deal between Beijing and Washington. The other thing they said was that they expect domestic demand will be supported by active government spending. And of course, this is a reference to the $120 billion stimulus package that was unveiled by Shinzo Abe in October.
Still, the BOJ kept guidance on policy unchanged, while its benchmark rate holds steady at minus 0.1%.
Stocks in Asia drifted lower overnight, though still remain close to highs for the year. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. The Nikkei 225 held on to losses, closing lower by 1/3%. Aussie bond yields and the Aussie dollar rose after the nation's unemployment rate fell back down to 5.2%. However, stocks in Sydney were sold off, the ASX 200 closing down 1/3%. In China, the CSI 300 retreated modestly, however, importantly held above 4,000 points, while stocks in Shanghai were little changed after erasing the day's losses as the central bank mounted another liquidity injection ahead of a seasonal cash squeeze around year-end. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Saleh, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Juliet, thank you. When it comes to China, one of the world's largest names in luxury expects a big boost next year. Tiffany & Company expects double-digit growth in China despite a weaker economy. We spoke with CEO Alessandro Bogliolio in Shanghai.
the weaker renminbi and all the efforts that the Chinese government has done in order to increase local consumption is an incentive for Chinese customers to purchase locally instead of flying to Japan, US, Europe. In spite of a slowdown, is still nicely growing at a very positive rate.
And Tiffany posted double-digit growth in mainland China each of the past 2 years. Last month, it agreed to be acquired by LVMH for $16 billion.
Well, back here in the U.S., shares of Micron are up 4% in early trading after solid earnings and a strong forecast. Here with more is Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The report adds to optimism that demand for memory chips is rebounding. It says revenue will be $4.5 to $4.8 billion in the fiscal second quarter. Wall Street has been predicting a recovery in demand and expects the market for computer and smartphone components will return to growth in the second half of next year. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Charlie, thank you. It is currently 5:06 on Wall Street. S&P futures are up 2 points this morning. Dow futures up 29. NASDAQ futures up 4. 10-year Treasury down 6/30 seconds. Yield 1.93%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.64%. The euro at 1.1138 against the dollar, and the yen 109.56. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news, and this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It's 5:07 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr has more on the history made in Washington and the rest of the news happening around the world this morning. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. President Trump laid out a blistering attack against House Democrats' vote to impeach him, saying the party showed deep hatred and disdain for the American voter and would pay for it in the 2020 election. Trump, speaking to supporters in Battle Creek, Michigan last night, says this lawless partisan impeachment is a political suicide march for the Democratic Party.
You are the ones obstructing justice. You are the ones bringing pain and suffering to our republic for your own selfish, personal, political, and partisan gain. They're bringing pain.
While both sides held their party lines in the House, one member, Justin Amash, a Republican turned independent, voted with the Democrats for impeachment, while another, the only presidential candidate that could cast a vote, Tulsi Gabbard, voted present. Tonight, the Democrats running for president head to Los Angeles for their final debate of the year. This debate will have the fewest candidates on stage yet this year, allowing the 7 candidates who qualified to go deeper into issues. Bloomberg will carry the debate live starting at 8 p.m. Wall Street time, followed by analysis from Kevin Cirilli. The fate of the Affordable Care Act was thrown back into limbo after a federal appeals court found a key piece of the original law unconstitutional, then kicked the case back to the judge who struck it down a year ago. Final resolution on whether former President Barack Obama's signature health care law lives or dies probably won't come before the 2020 election. The fight could still end up before the U.S. Supreme Court. Wildfires in Australia have prompted authorities to declare a state of emergency in New South Wales, where almost 100 bushfires are burning across the state. State Rural Fire Service Commissioner Shane Fitzsimmons said more than 2,500 firefighters are being deployed to fight the blazes in intense heat and dry conditions.
Whilst today is going to be a very bad day, a dangerous day here in New South Wales, the forecast is that Saturday will be even worse. So we're talking about some very serious and dangerous conditions.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Thanks, Michael. 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashour.
Nathan, Garrett Cole grew up in Southern California, attended UCLA, could have gone home. The Angels and Dodgers both wanted him, but the Yankees had an ace up their sleeve. Cole grew up a Yankee fan. He was captured in the stands at the 2001 World Series as an 11-year-old, holding a sign that read, "Yankee fan now and forever." Could have signed with the Yanks out of high school in 2008. Did sign with them as a free agent 11 years later.
I can remember as a little boy dreaming about being a Major League Baseball player, specifically a Yankee. And like Brian said, it's the right time and the right place to take that step. And I'm just tremendously excited. And I hope there's a lot of the young boys out there that chase their dreams just like I did.
Brian is Cashman, the Yankees general manager.
We're here in the right time, the right place.
We were very transparent about our interest in this particular player, Garrett Cole, a youthful Yankee fan that grew up and finished off to put himself, I think, in the best position possible, that when he wanted to, if he ever chose to, enter this time and place, that he would be the best prepared he possibly could be.
Cole brought that sign with him to the press conference. Rare win for the Devils. Their first game since the big Taylor Hall trade. They skated past Anaheim 3-1 in Newark. St. John's, his 10th win of the year, 85-57 overall. But Stony Brook made a visit to the defending national champs and lost at Virginia 56-44. Fourth loss in a row for North Carolina, beaten by second-ranked Gonzaga 94-81. Before and after coaching the Giants, Tom Coughlin worked in Jacksonville, first as coach, more recently as a team executive. Coughlin fired yesterday. When the Giants visit Washington Sunday, it looks like the rookie Daniel Jones will be back as the starting quarterback, healed from that high ankle sprain that puts Eli Manning back on the bench. For the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
All right, John, thanks. It's tax time for a couple Major League Baseball teams. Leading the pack, the Red Sox will pay a $13.4 million luxury tax after failing to make the pennant race. The Cubs will pay $7.6 million, while the Yankees owe $6.7 million. Bronx Bombers have run up a total of $348 million in tax since the payroll restraint system began in 2003. This is Bloomberg.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich, no. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/C's.
You know it's out there somewhere, but you just keep missing out. I'm talking about your dream job. Now it's easier to find and land your next role with the LinkedIn app. Build connections, keep in touch, and be the first to hear about new jobs. LinkedIn has more openings than applicants. And sometimes all it takes is one LinkedIn connection to land the job that's right for you. Don't miss out. Get your next big break and find the job meant for you. Download the free LinkedIn app today.
Ho, ho, ho. Who's made a list this year? I want a new phone, one with amazing cameras, ultra-wide lens, of course, live focus video. Well, it has to be 5G ready to stream all my films. Can it come with something awesome to listen to them through?
Darling, I think he was talking to the kids.
Get everything you want and more. Purchase a Samsung 5G ready device and claim a pair of silver wireless Galaxy Buds at no extra cost. Shop our 5G handsets in store or online at your local O2 store or o2.co.uk. 18 plus. Offer excludes Galaxy Fold 5G. Purchased by the 25th of the 12/19. Claim from Samsung within 30 days. T's and C's apply.
Heading for the net. Scores! On the goal line. Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Far wing, elevates, triple bucket.
The war of the crowd. The shot clock ticks down. Will the ball go in?
The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. And the replays just don't cut it.
The sideline, the man bleeds for three.
TuneIn Premium brings you every minute of the NBA season streaming live, so you can be there when it matters most. Hear it now, hear it live on TuneIn.
Fake in the lane, turnaround jumper from 8 feet is good on the
Search
right block.
NBA Today to start listening.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
Hotel chains and home sharing sites have been encroaching on each other's turf, and the latest player to blur the line is hospitality startup Sonder. Its model is a mix between WeWork and Airbnb. Now with the $1 billion valuation, Sonder is making a move into traditional hotels. I spoke to Sonder CEO Francis Davidson on Tuesday about the business model and how he plans to make Sonder stand out.
The way that Sonder works is by partnering with developers, and effectively we lease buildings. Last quarter, about 72% of the properties we took on was the entire building we managed. The idea is that we make spaces really attractive for travelers. It's kind of a next generation hotel experience, one which usually offers you an apartment, a studio, a multi-bedroom apartment sometimes, and also recently actual hotel rooms. We use a lot of technology to make the experience really frictionless.
So very competitive space. Is the technology why I would use Sonder instead of someone else?
I think it really, there's $1 trillion a year that's spent on accommodations globally, and, there's a lot of players. Marriott, the biggest in the world, has just a 4% market share, so there's a wide range of choices that consumers have. I think at the end of the day, what they love about what we offer is that they get a really attractive, sizable property for a cost that's usually a fraction of a hotel room.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app. Or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Government bonds are falling around the world as more central banks signal they're done easing policy for now. Stocks are little changed in Europe, while U.S. stock index futures also drift, leaving equities in major markets lingering close to record highs. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up a point this morning. Dow futures up 22, and NASDAQ futures also little change. The DAX in Germany is down 0.33%, and the CAC in Paris and the FTSE 100 are both down less than 0.1%. The Nikkei 225 in Japan was down 0.3%, so was the Hang Seng in Hong Kong. 10-year Treasury down 6/30 seconds, yield 1.93%. Yield on the 2-year 1.64%. NYMEX crude oil little changed at $60.94 a barrel, and COMEX gold also little changed at $1,478.50 an ounce. The euro 1.1136 against the dollar. The British pound at 1.3104. And the yen is at 109.53. Today we are watching for the weekly report on initial jobless claims out at 8:30 Wall Street time. At 9:45, it's a Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index and existing home sales and leading economic indicators out at 10. Nike among companies scheduled to report earnings today. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. The deeply divided House of Representatives took the historic step to impeach President Trump, charging him with high crimes and misdemeanors. It's only the third time in American history a president has been impeached. One day after impeaching President Trump, the Democratic-led House is expected to overwhelmingly pass one of his signature priorities, a bill implementing terms of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement is expected to pass today with bipartisan support. Household income has grown the most in tech and entertainment centers like Austin, Texas, Nashville, Tennessee, and large chunks of the West Coast in recent years. New figures released today by the U.S. Census Bureau show that areas that attracted highly educated workers like Denver and Pittsburgh also saw mean household incomes rise the most from 2013 to 2018. In the NHL, the Devils won. NBA, the Celtics were winners. The Wizards lost along with the Warriors. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Michael, thank you. It is 5:20 on Wall Street, live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios. This is Bloomberg Daybreak. Drew Mattis is our guest this morning, Chief Market Strategist at MetLife Investment Management. Obviously, the big story politically this morning is the impeachment of President Trump, but it doesn't seem to be the big story for market participants. What do you make of the lack of market reaction to this moment in history, Drew?
Well, I think this is one of those cases, on past times I've been on, I've said there's so many things going on where, Brexit and this process and trade, where there's just so many things that we know could happen, that it's very hard to price it. And this, it seems like the conclusion, that it was a foregone conclusion it was going to happen, and then that, the next stage is also seems to be a foregone conclusion. So I think, there'd have to be a surprise in order for people to price something different, and it seems unlikely there'll be a surprise.
Yeah. So at what point do you think political risk becomes a risk in this market?
I mean, there would have to be some new news, or something that suggests that that the outcome in the Senate is going to be different than's expected. And I don't. Obviously anything can happen, but I think that most people believe that they know what's going to happen in the Senate, and therefore, what happened in the House is interesting, but it's not going to change their view on how the markets are going to work.
Does the election, the move toward the choosing of a Democratic nominee, become something that markets take a closer look at as we get closer to that?
Oh, I'm sure it will once we have a sense of who it could be, and then how far they turn once they get the nomination, right? Because history's always shown that people say a lot of things towards the nomination, and then once they have the nomination, they tend to pivot. And the question is, who will be the nominee, and how far will they pivot?
So what's the next catalyst you're looking for? Is it the lack of specificity at this point on the U.S.-China trade deal? What are you looking for as we head into the new year?
I think the trade deal's a good question. We're going to see more information on Brexit as they begin to negotiate a separation agreement, and that process goes further forward. And so those will be things to be watching out for. And then, of course, the labor market's been so strong, at some point that's got to stop. And when it stops, it's not necessarily a sign that things are going to get worse, but rather than we have to start thinking about what might be happening to wages and then inflation.
Of course, this morning we had Riksbank moving out of negative rates for the first time in half a decade. Do you see that as the start of a trend?
Yeah, I think people are trying to move out of negative rates. It's something important for them to, the negative rate story, I think, is one where we're going to find that it was a failed experiment. And so I think, the more banks that move out of negative rates, the better off everyone's going to be. I see a move out of negative rates on the part of any central bank globally as a positive for the global economy.
And so how does that set up expectations for the Bank of England as it makes its decision later this morning?
I think the Bank of England's, once again, they've got something that they're dealing with Brexit that makes them a somewhat more special case. But I think, the trend has been towards the belief that low rates are not always helpful, and I think central banks are beginning to come around to that view. For a long time, there were only a few people out there saying low rates might cause more problems than they solve. And initially, at least, people didn't really want to hear that. And the more that it's been said, the more that people see how economies respond to ultra low interest rates and negative interest rates, the more people are beginning to understand that, hey, wait a second, these might not always be 100% positive. And I think we're seeing that with everyone else now. And I think, the Bank of England never went to negative rates. They never went to zero rates. So I think we're good there.
All right, Drew Mattis, Chief Market Strategist, MetLife Investment Management. Good to get your insights this morning on Bloomberg Daybreak. Little movement in the markets as far as U.S. equity futures go this morning. You are listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. Nike reports quarterly earnings today, and Bloomberg analysts say the company could deliver solid results driven by momentum in China. They're forecasting 11% year-over-year profit growth. Did you get a pay raise this year? There's a roughly 50-50 chance that you did. A new bank rate report shows that 49% of workers did enjoy a pay increase in one form or another, up from 38% last year and the highest amount since 2016, but half of U.S. workers did not see their pay go up. And for lower earners, in this report, it was worse. 2/3 of those making less than $30,000 a year saw no pay hike in 2019. The U.S. House today is scheduled to vote on the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Free Trade Agreement. The deal, which will replace NAFTA, cleared the House Ways and Means Committee. The Republican-led Senate, however, will not take up the deal until next year. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
How's work? If you're not loving your job and you're getting those Sunday blues, now's the time to make a change. With a LinkedIn app, it's now easier to find and land the job meant for you. There are millions of jobs on offer, and the LinkedIn app helps you hear about them first. Research shows applying within the first 10 minutes increases your chances of hearing back by up to 4 times. Stay in the know and grow your career. Download the free LinkedIn app today.
Christmas, a time for sharing gifts and laughter, and photos and videos. Make the most of it with a SIM-only deal packed with data from Tesco Mobile. Like a 10-gig SIM for just £13 a month. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile today. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 29th of December. 12-month contract and unlocked 4G-enabled phone required. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms. The Honda Jazz, the car that feels fabulously small on the outside, yet deceptively big on the inside, with its incredible storage solutions and magic folding seats. Not to mention the suite of advanced safety features. And now with the small but big Jazz event, it's available with 0% APR representative and 5 years complimentary servicing until January 31st. Visit your local dealer to find out more. Honda dealers are credit brokers, not lenders. Finance provided by Honda Finance Europe, authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Terms and conditions apply.
The extraordinary sale is now on at Bicester Village, with up to 60% off the recommended retail price at participating boutiques until the 24th of December. Enjoy luxury for less at Emma Bridgewater, The White Company, Molton Brown, The Creuset, and many more. With free parking, all-day festive dining, and restaurants open late, it's the perfect time to do your Christmas shopping. The extraordinary sale at Bicester Village.
I wish me a Merry Christmas. I wish me a Merry Christmas. I wish me a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Don't forget yourself this Christmas. Now you can choose from a range of extras like Amazon Music Unlimited, Audible, Amazon Prime Video, and Caffeine on us. Search O2 Christmas Extras.
On selected tariffs for 3 or 6 months, not available to existing Amazon Video and Music or Audible customers. Terms apply.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York.
Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 1061. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are little changed as investors largely shrug off the impeachment of President Trump. More on that in a moment. But first, the focus is on a central bank this morning.
Yeah, it is in Sweden. Riksbank ending half a decade of sub-zero easing, raising its key interest rate out of negative territory. It is a move that puts pressure on the European Central Bank, according to Bloomberg opinion columnist Marcus Ashworth.
I think it's momentous because I think it leads us to probably say that at some point the ECB ought to be recognising that negative rates won't work. Lagarde wants a year to settle things down after quite an aggressive move in September under Draghi and buy herself some time to have a real think.
And 90 minutes from now, the Bank of England is forecast to leave rates unchanged, but the focus will be on how many policymakers dissent. We get more from Bloomberg FX and rates strategist David Finnerty.
Of all the central banks today, I think BofE is actually the most interesting one because the market's going to go, how are you going to digest this latest development of the election? I actually think two will come out. I wouldn't be surprised a third, maybe even an outside chance of a fourth member saying they're going to cut rates.
And finally, the Bank of Japan held steady overnight but changed its statement to point to a brighter economic outlook. We get details from Bloomberg's Paul Jackson in Tokyo.
The Bank of Japan left policy untouched as a government stimulus package, progress in US-China trade talks, and signs of a bottoming of the global slowdown brightened the economic outlook. Still, economists noted that risks to trade and even Brexit remain. It's also yet to be seen how the economy will pick up from a sales tax and a typhoon. In Tokyo, Paul Jackson, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Paul, thank you. Back here in the U.S., shares of Micron Technology up 4% in early trading. The company giving a strong forecast and said it's through the worst of a slump in the memory chip industry.
And Deutsche Bank will reportedly cut 6,000 jobs tied to its private banking division. That's according to Handelsblatt, which says the cuts are part of the 18,000 that the German lender plans to eliminate by 2022.
Now let's get you up to date on how stocks are faring. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are little changed this morning, up a point. Dow futures up 27. NASDAQ futures little changed as well. The DAX in Germany is down 0.3%. 10-year Treasury down 6/32, yield 1.93%. The yield on the 2-year 1.64%. NYMEX crude oil little change this morning at $60.94 a barrel. And COMEX gold also little changed at $1,478.50 an ounce. The euro, 1.1136 against the dollar. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
All right, thanks, Karen. It's 5:33 on Wall Street. Let's get more on what's happening around the world now from Bloomberg's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Nathan. The House of Representatives impeached President Donald Trump on charges of abuse of power and obstructing Congress.
On this vote, the yeas are 229, the nays are 198, present is 1. Article 2 is adopted.
The historic votes, which won the support of almost all Democrats in the House, but not a single Republican, make Trump only the third president in U.S. history to be impeached. The chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, New York Democratic Representative Jerry Nadler, reacted to President Trump's impeachment.
Gives us no pleasure to stand here today. But President Trump's conduct has put our next election at risk. President Trump's behavior puts the integrity of our constitutional order at risk. And President Trump's continued actions put the rule of law at risk.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said she won't immediately name House managers to act as prosecutors in the Senate trial until we see what the process is in the Senate. As for President Trump, he held a rally in Battle Creek, Michigan. He took a swipe at Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, the widow of the longest ever serving member of Congress, John Dingell of Michigan. Trump recounted his A+ treatment he gave the family after Dingell's death in February.
She calls me up. It's the nicest thing that's ever happened. Thank you so much. John would be so thrilled. He's looking down. He'd be so thrilled. Thank you so much, sir. I said, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Maybe he's looking up. I don't know.
Congresswoman Dingell wrote, I'm preparing for the first holiday season without the man I love. You brought me down in a way you can never imagine. Democratic presidential candidates take the stage tonight for the sixth debate of the nomination race. The candidates will likely focus on policies that are sharply dividing Democrats, including health care and taxes. 7 contenders will gather for the 3-hour debate in Los Angeles at 8 p.m. Wall Street time, and Bloomberg will bring you that live. 4 people were shot at a Texas mall last night. 3 males and a 19-year-old woman are all in stable condition. San Antonio police say they are still looking for the shooters. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. Coming up to 5:36 on Wall Street, it's time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update with John Stashower.
Nathan, the Yankees have won 210 games over the last 2 seasons, but one thing was missing. A true ace, a guy who you knew would be on the mound for an opening day or a postseason opener. In Garrett Cole, they have that ace. Comes off a brilliant season in Houston. He went over 4 months without losing a game. He doesn't come cheaply. 9 years, $324 million. But with Cole taking off the Astros and onto the Yankees, it makes the Yanks the favorite to win a 2020 championship, and that's fine with Cole.
Pressure is a privilege. Pressure comes in situations that you've earned, right? You know, you pitch in big games in September and October because you've played well all year. I came 8 outs away from getting a ring. I'm as hungry as ever to finish that journey, finish that challenge. And in my opinion, there would be no better place to do it than New York.
Grew up a Yankee fan, shaved the beard, as all Yanks have to do. He's getting his number 45. Luke Voigt switching to 59. Hockey in Newark, Kyle Palmieri scored on the power play. Devils took the lead. They beat Anaheim 3-1. St. John's at Conoseca Arena beat Albany 85-57. Stony Brook lost at Virginia. Wagner lost at LaSalle. Upset late last night in Las Vegas. Utah over 6th-ranked Kentucky 69-66. The Jets' lone Pro Bowler, safety Jamal Adams, limited in practice but could return from his ankle injury Sunday against Pittsburgh. Giants quarterback Daniel Jones had the same injury. He practiced, was not limited. It looks like the rookie will start Sunday in Washington after Eli Manning pinch hit the last 2 games. Shake up in Jacksonville. Tom Coughlin, the former Giants coach who headed up Jaguars football operations, was fired. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stashower. Nathan?
Thanks, John. 5:37 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now with the cover on how Silicon Valley is using smart devices to listen to your most intimate moments. Austin Carr wrote the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
These devices can be hacked, and I think that's a major concern, and that one that was just a bit naive for tech company not to think was there.
Read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go and listen to Business Week with Carol Masser and Jason Kelly weekdays at 2 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio. It's 5:38 on Wall Street time now for the Tri-State Business Report. Here's Bloomberg's Ed Corey.
Hey, Nathan, Manhattan leads the way among U.S. counties in the information economy. Publishing and newer technology as well helped to generate about $100 billion for the economy of Manhattan's New York County last year, beating places like Silicon Valley and Seattle, according to the Bureau of Economic Analysis. New York City is waiting on Apple 1 year after the tech giant announced it would bring hundreds of jobs to New York, and on the heels of big Manhattan lease announcements from Facebook and Amazon, the city's real estate industry is still waiting for the iPhone developer to make its move. A bill in the New Jersey legislature would boost the reuse and recycling of unwanted paint. It would start a collection program funded by a fee charged on every can of paint sold. Towns and counties right now are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to dispose of the material. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
All right, Ed, thanks. It's 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Jeff Bellinger, and on WLW in Cincinnati, I'm reporting that only half of all workers got raises this year.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KRLD in Dallas. An American Airlines mechanic pleaded guilty to sabotaging a jetliner.
I'm Caroline Hepker on Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on today's Queen's speech, in which Boris Johnson will lay out his government's legislative plans.
I'm Tom Busby, and on KYW in Philadelphia, I'll be reporting on Pennsylvania gaming officials approving the opening of another mini casino in a former Sears store at an area mall.
I'm Ed Corey on KFBK in Sacramento. I'm reporting Wells Fargo has tapped an investment banker to help repair its image.
Those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. And some of the other stories we're watching, BMW and Daimler ending their joint car-sharing service in North America. They're also halting service in London, Brussels, and Florence due to rising costs and low ridership. It's a setback in BMW and Daimler's ambitions to compete with Uber and Lyft. Amazon is getting prepared for Brexit. Bloomberg News has learned the company is looking for its first warehouse in Ireland. It would be used to fulfill orders currently shipped from the UK. S&P futures higher now by 2 points. Dow futures up 32. NASDAQ futures gaining 3 points now. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Christmas. A time for celebrating, unwrapping, and unwinding. Capture every moment with an epic iPhone 6S with a 12-megapixel camera. Now only $12.99 a month from Tesco Mobile, saving you £72. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Saving £2 per month over 36 months was £14.99. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements required. Subject to status. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
You know it's out there somewhere, but you just keep missing out. I'm talking about your dream job. Now it's easier to find and land your next role with the LinkedIn app. Build connections, keep in touch, and be the first to hear about new jobs. LinkedIn has more openings than applicants. And sometimes all it takes is one LinkedIn connection to land the job that's right for you. Don't miss out. Get your next big break and find the job meant for you. Download the free LinkedIn app today.
At Wix, we'll create your dream kitchen from design to show-off ready and take care of everything. And now, get up to 50% off showroom kitchen units. Book your free design appointment today. Cure your house embarrassment with Wix. Selected ranges excluded. See wix.co.uk.
Ho, ho, ho. Who's made a list this year? I want a new phone. One with amazing cameras, ultra-wide lens, of course, live focus video. Well, it has to be 5G ready to stream all my films. Can it come with something awesome to listen to them through?
Darling, I think he was talking to the kids.
Get everything you want and more. Purchase a Samsung 5G ready device and claim a pair of silver wireless Galaxy Buds at no extra cost. Shop our 5G handsets in store or online at your local O2 store or o2.co.uk. 18 plus. Offer excludes Galaxy Fold 5G. Purchased by the 25th of the 12th 19. Claim from Samsung within 30 days. T's and C's apply.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
It's 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
A defiant President Trump is labeling his impeachment by the House of Representatives a suicide march for the Democratic Party. Trump spoke at a freewheeling rally in Michigan last night.
The president was impeached for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. The top Republican on the House Judiciary Committee, Doug Collins, says it was the majority Democrats who are guilty of abuse of power.
In this House, wherever the rules are disregarded, chaos and mob rule actually begin, and the majority has taken that to a new level.
The impeachment next goes to the Senate for trial.
And that's where Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff has concerns.
The President of the United States should be tried. And the question is now whether Senator McConnell will allow a fair trial in the Senate.
7 Democratic presidential hopefuls take to the debate stage tonight. The televised contest takes place in California, the biggest prize in the primary season, and home to 1 in 8 Americans. I'm John Trout.
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrow.
Is that good for American finance?
What is happening with the head count?
Right, where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance, weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Government bonds are falling around the world as more central banks signal they're done easing policy for now. Stocks are a little changed in Europe, while U.S. stock index futures are also drifting. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up about 2 points. Dow futures up 30. NASDAQ futures up 3. The DAX in Germany's down 0.3%. 10-year Treasury down 6/32. Yield 1.93%. The yield on the 2-year 1.64%. NYMEX crude oil is little change at $60.94 a barrel. COMEX gold little change at $14.77.90 an ounce. The euro 1.1133 against the dollar. British pound 1.3101 and the yen 109.52. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, Donald Trump will be the first impeached U.S. president to seek re-election in more than 150 years, and he's betting that voters in key swing states will view his rebuke at the hands of House Democrats as a rallying cry. Recent national polls have shown weakening support for Trump's removal from office, and in states including Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, data and interviews suggest the picture is even brighter for Trump. Meanwhile, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said that she will not immediately name House managers to act as prosecutors in the Senate trial until we see what the process is in the Senate. And Russian President Vladimir Putin says the Trump presidency is not over. Putin, during his annual news conference today, says the impeachment is spurious. In the NHL, the Devils won. In the NBA, the Celtics were winners. The Wizards lost along with the Warriors. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. We're coming up to 5:49 on Wall Street. I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg Daybreak. The ranks of Wall Street analysts have been thinning over the years as banks look to cut costs and automation takes over much of the workload. But regulation may be accelerating the trend. For more on this, we're joined by Bloomberg News reporter Justina Lee in London. Justina, good morning. And you're looking at one regulation in particular that's gotten a fair amount of attention among market participants, MiFID II in Europe. What is the impact that it's having?
Right, exactly. I mean, it's a very clunky acronym, but it's really seen its impact spread across Europe. So one thing in particular that has been very impactful is that it forced the buy side to separate research costs from trading fees. Because in the past, research was almost free marketing to induce trading flows, but European regulators didn't like that. And so once you separate the two costs, what happened was that a lot of asset managers became a lot stingier with paying for research specifically, which as a result has kind of slashed their budgets and caused a lot of these job cuts across the research industry.
Now, talk a little bit more about the impact that this regulation is having on banks' bottom line. Is it having a demonstrable weight on these banks?
Right. I mean, I guess there are a few trends here. I mean, first of all, equity trading commissions have already been falling for a few years, and that's mostly because of technology. But at the same time, banks now have to charge research separately. And you can say that sounds like good news because then you have another income stream. But what's going on is that on one hand, trading commissions are falling, but at the same time, it's hard for them to really make that much money off research. Because in Europe, what's been happening is that asset managers are now paying for the research out of their own pockets rather than using client money like they used to. And so the result has been that, once you are actually spending your own money, you will naturally slash your research budgets. And that's what's been happening.
So how is this having an impact on U.S. banks' behavior in particular? Are they deciding not to spend as much money on research now?
Right. I mean, in the U.S., it's kind of complicated because obviously MiFID II hasn't actually directly forced U.S. banks to do anything. I mean, it's just European regulations. But I mean, U.S. banks have obviously kind of felt the impact of that as well, serving European clients. And we've seen research cuts this year across Citibank, Deutsche Bank, Macquarie, Nomura, and so mostly it's been negative. But at the same time, we also see some banks, I mean, it's probably in the minority here, trying to take advantage of this. Goldman hired some new analysts this year, and they said it was to get a bigger piece of what is overall a smaller pie.
Just generally, though, is there as much of a need for research anyway, given the rise in technology and just, how much artificial intelligence has done to smooth the process of research on Wall Street?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And fundamentally, with so much money moving into passive products, I mean, you can even say that, who needs an analyst to tell you what stock to buy when you're buying all of the stocks? And one thing that this Citigroup analyst told me is that, back in the old days before technology, you as a Wall Street analyst, you can prove your worth just by almost telling your readers what the news are or what the share price is. But nowadays, everyone can get that off of Yahoo Finance or whatever. Yeah. And some banks are even experimenting with writing reports with AI. And so, I mean, it really is an existential crisis for the sell-side research analysts.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's got to put even more pressure on analysts to prove their worth and, come up with something kind of out of the box.
Yeah, and you can even say, I mean, what is an analyst worth to begin with? Because a lot of people would say, they get their calls, wrong a lot of the time. But of course, their defense is that they don't exist to get the calls right. It's more kind of to have a good discussion with the investors maybe, or maybe to tell the investors what other investors are thinking. But it's always been like a somewhat kind of amorphous role.
Justina Lee, thanks for this. Really good talking with you this morning. That's Justina Lee, a reporter for Bloomberg News, joining us from London. You can read her story on this at Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg terminal. Karen?
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
Uber agreed to pay $4.4 million after an investigation by the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission into alleged sexual harassment and retaliation at the rideshare company. The National Labor Relations Board eliminated a procedural bar that prevented employers from both contesting newly formed unions and fighting against union information requests. And Domino's Pizza gets a second chance to fight a union drive after the NLRB threw out the results of a vote to unionize a branch in Howard Beach, New York.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need, all on one legal research platform, including guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now our top legal story today, the impeachment of President Trump. For just the third time in U.S. history, the House voted to impeach the president. Now the trial heads to the Senate. For a look at what's ahead in those proceedings, Bloomberg's David Weston speaks with Robert Mintz, a former federal prosecutor and head of the white-collar criminal practice at McCarter and English.
The standard of proof here is really very much in the eye of the beholder at the end of the day. Let's remember that the standard of proof in this trial that will take place in the Senate is not like a criminal trial. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not even a preponderance of the evidence. What the Constitution says, it is whatever the members of the Senate believe is necessary to remove a president. So it seems like at this point, depending on which side of the aisle you sit, there's either overwhelming evidence or there's no clear connection between the president asking for this favor from the president of Ukraine to conduct this investigation into the Bidens and to look into the source of the break-in of the Democratic committee's emails. So to do that and to hold up the $400 million in military aid in exchange for those requests, which were arguably more to benefit his own political interest than to seek out and root out corruption in Ukraine.
Do you typically have a transcript where the person who's being accused says, and by the way, let me make this really clear to you, I'm not going to do this unless you do that? Because in the transcript, President Trump did talk at some length about the aid, and then he did turn around and say, I want you to do me a favor. If this were a regular conspiracy alleged, would you need more proof than this?
That's a great question, because in criminal cases, there's two kinds of evidence. There's what's called direct evidence, which is an eyewitness or a statement, an admission that's made by a witness, or a recording where somebody admits to wrongdoing. Then there's something else called circumstantial evidence, which is where there's evidence of some kind of guilt, some kind of consciousness of guilt that's not direct, but it can be reasonably concluded by evidence that sort of surrounds that. And at the end of the trial, a judge will instruct a jury that circumstantial evidence is to be given the same weight as direct evidence. It's no less powerful. And so to answer your question directly, yes, there's criminal cases where all the time, we have cases where there's convictions that are built largely circumstantially. There's not always direct evidence of somebody's guilt here. So certainly the Democrats are going to argue that there is overwhelming circumstantial evidence, even though the president did not expressly say that unless you give me what I'm looking for, these investigations, I'm not going to give you the military aid that the Congress has already approved.
And that's Robert Mintz, head of the white-collar criminal practice at McCarter and English, speaking with Bloomberg's David Weston. Catch more of that interview, plus analysis of the latest legal and political news on Bloomberg's Balance of Power, weekdays at noon on Bloomberg Radio and television. Right now, S&P futures are little changed, up 1.5 points. Dow futures up 32. NASDAQ futures up 3. The DAX in Germany is down 0.3%. 10-year Treasury down 6/32, yield 1.93%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.64%. NYMEX crude oil little change at $60.94 a barrel, and COMEX gold little change at $1,478.30 an ounce. The euro 1.1141 against the dollar. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Ah, Christmas, a time for sharing gifts and laughter, and photos and videos. Make the most of it with a SIM-only deal packed with data from Tesco Mobile. Like a 10-gig SIM for just £13 a month. It's just one of the ways we're celebrating 100 years of great value. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile today. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 29th of December. 12-month contract and unlocked 4G-enabled phone required. Terms apply. See tescomobile.com/terms.
How's work? If you're not loving your job and you're getting those Sunday blues, now's the time to make a change. With a LinkedIn app, it's now easier to find and land the job meant for you. There are millions of jobs on offer, and the LinkedIn app helps you hear about them first. Research shows applying within the first 10 minutes increases your chances of hearing back by up to 4 times. Stay in the know and grow your career. Download the free LinkedIn app today.
At Wix, we'll create your dream kitchen from design to show-off ready and take care of everything. And now, get up to 50% off showroom kitchen units. Book your free design appointment today. Cure your house embarrassment with Wix. Selected ranges excluded. See wix.co.uk.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Thursday, December 19th, 2019. Coming up this hour.
For just the third time in history, the House votes to impeach the president.
We have a flurry of central bank decisions, including the first move out of negative interest rates in half a decade.
Up next, attention turns to the Bank of England and its policy stance for the new year.
While the impeachment vote was along party lines, at least one Democrat voted present, and a Republican turned independent voted with the Democrats. I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. A win for the Devils and for St. John's. And coming up, we'll hear from the new $324 million Yankee, Garrett Cole.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures are little change this morning. 6:01 on Wall Street. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 2 points. Dow futures up 35. NASDAQ futures up about 5 now. The DAX in Germany down 0.3%. The CAC in Paris little changed. FTSE 100 up 0.2%. Nikkei 225 in Japan was down 0.3%, and so was the Hang Seng in Hong Kong. 10-year Treasury down 6/32, yield 1.93%. Yield on the 2-year 1.64%. NYMEX crude oil is little changed at $60.94 a barrel. COMEX gold also little changed at $14.78 an ounce. The euro 1.1142 against the dollar. The yen 109.51. Nathan.
And Karen, we begin with an historic vote on Capitol Hill. For just the third time in U.S. history, a president has been impeached. Here with the latest is Amy Morris in our Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. Almost all of the Democrats and no Republicans voted to impeach the president. The next step is a trial in the Senate, and House Intelligence Committee Chairman Adam Schiff has concerns about how that might be handled.
The President of the United States should be tried. And the question is now whether Senator McConnell will allow a fair trial in the Senate.
As House members voted, President Trump was taking the stage at a campaign rally, and he says impeaching him will only strengthen his support.
I know one thing, Americans will show up by the tens of millions next year to vote Pelosi the hell out of office.
Now House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says she'll wait to send over those articles of impeachment until the Senate establishes rules for the trial. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Amy, thank you. We'll have more on the impeachment vote in just a moment. But first, we have several central bank moves to talk about, beginning in Sweden. The Riksbank ended half a decade of sub-zero easing, raising its key interest rate out of negative territory. Let's get more from Bloomberg opinion columnist Marcus Ashworth.
They can get the specter of negative rates behind them. They tried it. It hasn't really worked for them. And they want to send a message that they're not going to muck around anymore. They're off negative rates. They're going to keep it at zero. And they wait to see what happens in the ECB.
And Sweden's benchmark rate now stands at 0, while the European Central Bank holds steady at minus 0.5%. The krona strengthened just slightly on the move as most market participants expected the hike.
Well, up next, the Bank of England issues a decision. While it's widely expected to keep rates on hold, we'll be watching for how many policymakers dissent with a call for lower rates. David Finnerty is an FX and rates strategist for Bloomberg.
I actually think 2 will come out. I wouldn't be surprised a third, maybe even an outside chance of a fourth member saying they're going to cut rates. If that happens, I think that B of E may start signaling, hey, we may be cutting a lot more before the end of next year. Net market pricing, if that's the case, and then you'll see sterling sell off. Add this all together, if they want to signal a rate cut, they certainly have the evidence to do it.
Economists see just 2 members calling for lower rates, and current market pricing predicts the BOE will wait until November before cutting rates.
Overnight in Asia, the Bank of Japan left policy unchanged, but changed its statement to point to a brighter economic outlook. We get the details on that from Bloomberg's Brian Fowler in Tokyo.
The BOJ said that while overseas risks remain high, they no longer kept the assessment that such risks were increasing. And this is definitely a nod to the Phase 1 trade deal between Beijing and Washington. The other thing they said was that they expect domestic demand will be supported by active government spending. And of course, this is a reference to the $120 billion stimulus package that was unveiled by Shinzo Abe in October.
Still, the BOJ kept guidance on policy unchanged while its benchmark rate holds steady at minus 0.1%.
Stocks in Asia drifted lower overnight, though they still remain close to highs of the year. Bloomberg's Juliette Sally joins us from Singapore with details. Good morning, Juliette.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. The Nikkei 225 held on to losses, closing lower by 1/3%. Aussie bond yields and the Aussie dollar rose after the nation's unemployment rate fell back down to 5.2%. However, stocks in Sydney were sold off. The ASX 200 closing down 1/3%. In China, the CSI 300 retreated modestly, however importantly held above 4,000 points, while stocks in Shanghai were little changed after erasing the day's losses as the central bank mounted another liquidity injection ahead of a seasonal cash squeeze around year-end. In Singapore, I'm Juliette Saleh, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Julia, thank you. When it comes to China, one of the world's largest names in luxury expects a big boost next year. Tiffany & Company expects double-digit growth in China, despite a weaker economy. We spoke with CEO Alessandro Bagliolio in Shanghai.
The weaker renminbi and all the efforts that the Chinese government has done in order to increase local consumption is an incentive for Chinese customers to purchase locally instead of flying to Japan, US, Europe. In spite of a slowdown, is still nicely growing at a very positive rate.
And Tiffany posted double-digit growth in mainland China each of the past 2 years. Last month, it agreed to be acquired by LVMH for $16 billion.
And back here in the U.S., shares of Micron are up 4% in early trading after solid earnings and a strong forecast. Here with more is Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
The report adds to optimism that demand for memory chips is rebounding. It says revenue will be $4.5 to $4.8 billion in the fiscal second quarter. Wall Street has been predicting a recovery in demand and expects the market for computer and smartphone components will return to growth in the second half of next year. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Charlie, thank you. And again, S&P futures are little changed, up 1.5 points. Dow futures up 29. NASDAQ futures up 2. The DAX in Germany is down 0.3%. 10-year Treasury down 7/32, yield 1.94%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.64%. NYMEX crude oil is up less than 0.1%, up 4 cents at $60.97 a barrel. And COMEX gold is down 60 cents, little changed at $14.78 an ounce. Straight ahead, the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
Okay, Karen, thank you. It is 6:07 on Wall Street. Let's bring in Michael Barr to get a check of what else is going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. President Trump laid out a blistering attack against House Democrats' vote to impeach him, saying the party showed deep hatred and disdain for the American voter and would pay for it in the 2020